Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063, The Game. Happy Thursday, Nashville. We are broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville Studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Jake Lyman in for Jared Stillman today. We've got a fun show planned for you. As always, Ian Safar is here. For the first hour, we got Dr. Crane, Nick Frazier with us.
Howdy. Hello, sir.
Coming right over from his midday shift as the producer.
Yeah.
Jack of all trades over here.
Thank you.
3 to 4, we'll have Max Hurst talking all things Preds. Should be fun. A little season preview with the regular season is a week away. Exactly.
Yeah.
Next Thursday. And then rounding it out, there's usually just an hour of TD on this program on Thursdays. You're going to get him for 2 hours today from 4 to 6. And you usually only get 15 minutes of phones for TD. We're going to give you 30. We're going to give you 30 minutes to ask TD whatever you want from 5 to 5:30. That is coming up later on in the show. So we're covering everything. Preds from 3 to 4, Titans from 4 to 6, and kind of a smorgasbord here for this first hour here, Nick. First thing I've told you and Ian, I'm very, very happy that the Tigers were able to win their first 2 games of the series, me and Derek Mason's Detroit Tigers, because I would be in shambles during the show if I had to watch a decisive game 3 while trying to host this radio program.
That could have been fun.
I know Jared was struggling on Monday during that doubleheader. He was trying to do NFL pregame too, like trying to balance both. I am glad I don't have to worry about it. My Tigers pulled it off, came through, and beat the Astros in 2 games. They will play Cleveland on Saturday. I feel for all the Braves fans out there.
Yeah,
that was a tough one in San Diego. We got lots of Mets fans at the station getting ready for tonight's game 3 against the Brewers. Playoff baseball is just fun, Nick Frazier. It's a lot of fun.
It really is. And before the show, I was even telling you, I was like, something about midday playoff baseball.
Yep.
There's just something about it. It's like a full slate of baseball. You can watch from noon all the way to like 11 o'clock at night. It's just nothing beats it, you know?
I have loved the last 2 days. I haven't had much to do during those Tigers games, so I've been able to just enjoy it. Being a Tigers fan, I haven't been able to enjoy playoff baseball since I was a freshman in high school. And the last time they won a playoff game, even, I was in middle school. So to get to see these last 2 games, both nail biters where the Tigers come through in the end, I missed playoff baseball and having those moments so much. I know I feel for the Braves fans out there. You guys got your World Series a few years ago, but it's been awesome. There hasn't been a bad game so far. Padres Braves game 1 was 4-0, which I guess is probably the biggest blowout. I think the Mets maybe beat the Brewers 8-4 on Tuesday as well.
Yeah.
But like outside of that, they've all been close 1-run games down to the wire. Yesterday, Tigers needed a bases clearing triple in the 8th to beat the Astros. Royals and Orioles were decided by 1 run both days. Like outside of maybe playoff hockey, I think playoff baseball is the most intense that you can get in the postseason.
Yeah, I mean, the suspense just builds and builds and builds. And when you get around the 6th, 7th inning and your favorite team's either down by 1 or they're having a 1-run lead, you're just thinking, oh boy, can they either hold on to the lead or can we come back? And that's just the whole, you're like, I think Willie said it best. You're on pins and needles.
Yep. And it's different from every other sport because it's just it's such a one-on-one sport. It's like this guy at the plate right now could change the game at any moment. Hockey is similar to that. If you get into like overtime playoff hockey, I think that tops baseball. But October baseball, it's just so much fun. And I'm glad that I get to enjoy it again for the first time in a decade.
We're happy for you, Jake. I'm surprised you're not wearing any of your jerseys.
Oh, I would have if they were playing right now, I would have the jersey on for sure.
Well noted. You know, and you mentioned like key players in games like these. Like I'm gonna go to the Kansas City Royals for prime example. Bobby Witt Jr.
Yeah,
obviously is a key name on that team, but he's really stood out in that little wild card series there because there was a 2 or 3 plays up the middle where he dove and actually stopped a run from going home. I mean, that's vital. Like, sure, he may have got the out at first, but at the same time, you're still not allowing the team to score runs.
I think I saw something that he is the first player ever to drive in the winning run in each of his first 2 postseason games. I mean, that dude's special.
Yeah.
And we've got 2 good AL series. I think Detroit and Cleveland. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Even as a Tigers fan, I don't know who comes out of that. Cleveland's got the best bullpen in the league. They got a good lineup. Jose Ramirez is one of the best players in baseball. But the Tigers have Tarek Skubal and Chaos in their pitching rotation, and a bunch of young, gritty players who seem to get it done. And then, Royals, Yankees, that's star power up and down with Bobby Witt and Juan Soto and Aaron Judge. I think those are going to be fun. Yankees, obviously the favorite to make the World Series out of the AL, but that should be good. And then, Dodgers, Padres, maybe the two best teams in the NL, along with the Phillies. That's going to be a fun series too.
Yeah, and I'm pumped for the Dodgers and Padres series because it's like must-see TV. I mean, obviously you got Mookie Betts, the local product here.
Yep.
You're obviously going to have some sort of affiliation for watching that, but just the heavy hitters of Shohei Ohtani, Freddie Freeman, like that. I will say the Dodgers, I guess, starting 9 of that batting rotation.
Ridiculous.
It developed throughout the season. Teoscar Hernandez was a player that didn't get his feet wet at the beginning of the season, was striking out a little bit, was getting some bloopers here and there, but then eventually around the All-Star break was getting more RBIs, and he was starting to hit more home runs. He was in the home run derby, and that showed that his power developed throughout the season. And and now here they are in the playoffs.
And this Padres team too. I mean, you got Fernando Tatis, Manny Machado, Xander Bogaerts, and then Jackson Merrill, who's probably the NL Rookie of the Year. Even with what Paul Skeens has done, Merrill's been just as good. So that series, that might be a World Series decider. All respect to the Phillies. They've been great all year, but,
Right.
Dodgers and Padres, I think those might be the two best and, hottest teams in the NL right now. So lots of fun. And of course, tonight, again, Brewers, Mets, lots of connections here. Ian's got his Mets shirt on behind the glass over there.
Yes, I do.
Willie Donick with his LGM before he hopped off the
Fully
mic.
anticipating a complete meltdown tonight.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
I think they got it in them. I'm going to tell you right now, Ian, I think Lindor's going to be the clutch factor. I mean, this team.
I mean, he has been clutch for them the entire second half. So, I mean, that wouldn't be surprising. But, as a Mets fan, it's just, I shouldn't say I'm a huge Mets fan, but just kind of
follow along.
Yeah. It's kind of, through osmosis through my family and stuff.
Right.
But, it'll be fun.
And we got TD coming on later in the show. We will spend 90% of the time with TD on football and on the Titans, but I will get his thoughts on this decisive Game 3. Big Mets fan, Teron Davenport. We will talk about that later on the show as well. Quickly, before we move on from baseball, Dr. Crane, your St. Louis Cardinals getting a shout out on our text line. Skylar says, let's not forget David Freese, Game 6 of the World Series back in 2011.
I do remember that day.
That's, I mean, I think for people our age, that's probably, trying to think if anything beats it, probably the baseball moment that everybody remembers. Like basketball, most people remember like blocked by James in the Cavs Warriors Game 7. I feel like most people remember, we'll see you tomorrow night, David Freese, those 2 home runs against the Rangers.
And it's interesting too, because that one play itself is somewhere in a Cardinals Hall of Fame in some regard. But it's interesting because the Cardinals actually tried to induct him into the Cardinals Hall of Fame, and he denied it because he's like, one play doesn't really define my time in St. Louis. So he's not saying he's bigger or better than the Cardinals, but the one play shouldn't just get you into somewhere. So which I appreciate. So, but yeah, Cardinals, they're on a slump right now. They're trying to figure things out.
Well, I was telling you back before we went on air, there have been 3 teams previously that have been 10 games back of a playoff spot, over 115 games into the season, and won a playoff series. They have all won the World Series after that. The 4th one is the 2024 Detroit Tigers. So do with that what you will. Go Tigs, the gritty Tigs. They're getting it done right now. Do want to mention Nate on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, says, go Brew Crew. Brewers connection as well. The Nashville Sounds, AAA affiliate of the Brewers. So a lot of those guys that are playing with this Brewers team right now, Sal Frelick was there earlier, or last year he was.
Mm-hmm.
Jackson Churio, who hit 2 home runs last night, he was with the Sounds briefly last year before he signed that big deal and went up to Milwaukee.
Bryce Terang,
yep. The Garrett Mitchell, who hit the home run last night to go ahead, he was there last year as well. And there were a few of the rehabbers. I was, when I filled in for Jeff Hem back in July, got to see Gary Sanchez, Jared Koenig, Devin Williams. All those guys have made their way through Nashville within the last couple of years. So
it's crazy. Good product.
Yeah. And we always joke about how, the Milwaukee AAA affiliate in baseball is in Nashville, and Nashville's AHL affiliate is in Milwaukee. So 2 cities joined by sports.
It's a 1-2 punch. Good combo.
We love it. if you want to keep talking about baseball, let us know. If you have any more thoughts on the MLB postseason, you can text or call us 615-737-1025. Our phone line's driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. But we will move on to the Titans here coming up next. We're going to talk some trade deadline. It's coming up quickly, 4 weeks away or so until we get the NFL trade deadline. We're seeing rumors flying. Devontae Adams, will he be moved? And what will the Titans do at the trade deadline? A couple of pieces, some veteran guys that maybe it makes more sense to get some draft capital for him. So we will talk about that next. Who might be on the move for the Titans and whether they want to be sellers at the deadline. That is up next. Jake Lyman in for Jared Stillman today here on Stillman Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Jake Lyman in for Jared Stillman today. Jared will be back tomorrow. We've got a plethora of co-hosts today. Nick Frazier is with us until 3. Max Hers will join us from 3 to 4 to talk Preds. And then the second half of the show is all Teron Davenport. Double the TD Power Hour. We'll hear from you coming up at 5. If you have questions for TD, you can start getting them in now if you want to. 615-737-1025. Our text line is driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Just talk some baseball to start the show. MLB postseason, October baseball. October as a sports month is one of the best. Up there with maybe March is probably the best when you got, NCAA tournament. Baseball starting up again. You've got NFL free agency into the draft. Like, that's a fun part of
Masters around that time.
Masters coming up too. Yeah, that March, April time, you get into NBA, NHL playoffs. So that's a good time. I think October is up there with it for sure. There's a debate to be had there. But let's get back into some football. The Titans got a win on Monday night, as maybe not the most beautiful way to win a football game. They did put up 30 for the first time in almost 3 years.
I think it was 1,003 days.
Yeah, over 1,000 days between the Titans putting up 30 points, bookended by games against the Dolphins. They did it January 2nd of 2022, I think it was, and then did it again on Monday night. Put up 30 points, only threw the ball 3 times in the second half. So it wasn't exactly an offensive spectacle that the Titans put out there, but they got to 30. Maybe get some hope heading into the bye week. Get some good vibes in that building. They come back. They play the Colts at home coming up a week from Sunday. But there's still a question of, if this team is not in contention when the trade deadline comes up in a couple of weeks, will they sell off some pieces to add some draft capital and continue to give them some ammo if possibly they do need to move up for a quarterback, or for guys that you can build around Will Levis or whoever the quarterback is next year? Do you think that the Titans, if they lose next Sunday against the Colts, does that kind of cement them as being a seller at the deadline and kind of take them out of any hope of getting back into a playoff race?
I mean, yes, in some regard. Like, for me, because of the 30-point win, and if the Titans end up losing a, let's say, 1-possession game to the Colts after the bye week, I think that puts them on the fringe of being sellers at the deadline. Now, if it's a 2-possession game they lose by, yeah, for sure, I think they're sellers. I mean, then it comes down to who you getting rid of. That's for me where it comes to, is like, is it going to be more offensive side of the ball you're going to get rid of, or the defensive side of the ball?
I think you don't want to tear down the structure that you've built, because whether Will Levis is your quarterback next year, which it's looking more and more like he won't be,
right?
But whoever your quarterback is, whether you get a veteran bridge guy or you draft somebody in the first round, you want to give them the best chance to succeed. So trading away anybody who can help them next year seems, illogical for this team to trade away somebody who they think can be a piece of this team next year. But anybody on an expiring contract, I think, should be fair game. So, DeAndre Hopkins has been the big name that people have mentioned. There are a lot of teams out there that need wide receivers. The Jets, the Chiefs, who they got good news on Rashee Rice.
Yeah, they're waiting for the swelling in his knee to go down.
Patrick Mahomes didn't end his season by nosediving into his knee after throwing an interception. But they're already down Hollywood Brown for the year. Could be down Rashee Rice for a while. That seems like it could be a pretty reasonable move for the Chiefs to make, to get a guy like DeAndre Hopkins, a veteran, in that room. But who else could possibly be on the move if the Titans do lose to the Colts on Sunday? You're 1-4 with road games against Buffalo and Detroit coming up next. So the road back seems pretty tough if you lose to the Colts next Sunday. So if they do lose that game, I think you maybe have to start throwing some feelers out there. Hopkins, maybe Quandre Diggs.
Maybe. I mean, Quandre Diggs, in the time that he's played for the Titans this year, we saw it against Miami. He had an interception on a 2-point conversion. Is that right? And then
yes, one-handed.
Yeah,
was it not
in the end zone? It was pretty impressive. And then you also have the 4th down stop as well, which he's been every bit of what the Titans have asked for. They want dogs on the defensive side of the ball. They want like 11 heads at the football. Like he's every bit of that. And I think that's exactly what Denard Wilson wants on this defensive side of the ball. So if that's a guy they were trying to get rid of, it's gonna have to be to at least some contender going for a Super Bowl, because it's not going to no team that's 2-2 or 2-5 or whatever that may be.
Jared might feel a disturbance in the force when I say this, but you got to give Rand Carthon credit for what he did on the defense this offseason.
I think the post just shook it. Wait a minute.
Because think about all of the guys that have been brought in just this offseason on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
Tavondre Sweat, Kenneth Murray, Ernest Jones, L'Jarius Sneed. Chidobe Awuzie's hurt, but he's been solid. Jarvis Brownlee Jr., Quandre Diggs. Jamal Adams, who was brought in on basically a minimum deal, is probably the only guy who hasn't been a success so far.
I mean, he's put the uniform on. For me, like, he's put the uniform on, and I don't see any grass stains on the uniforms.
He played, 2 snaps against his former team, the Jets?
Yeah. I don't have any comments about Jamal Adams. I've said him already on the weekend show.
I felt like that one was always a low risk, low reward move. Like, you probably weren't going to get much out of him. If you get anything, it's probably worth it. He hasn't done much. But Diggs has certainly raised his trade value. I don't know how much you're going to get for an older safety. Maybe you get a 6th or a 7th. But if you can get some return on your investment, it might make sense. Here's one that I will pose to you. And this is just me playing devil's advocate, because I think Hopkins and Diggs are the two that stand out the most as trade candidates.
Right.
What if the Titans tried to flip Ernest Jones? Because they haven't signed him to an extension. He's still on an expiring contract. If you could get more than a late round pick swap, it would make sense.
I don't know. Ian, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I'd be interested to see if anybody would, what they'd pony up, considering they probably had their chance to acquire him.
And that is a good point.
From the Rams, and no one really stepped up to the plate on that. But I think the number one trade option is DeAndre Hopkins. As far as for the Titans, I don't know. I don't exactly know what you would be able to get. And, Hopkins, I wonder what he was really looking for, what he wants to get out of the situation. How much does he want to win? That wasn't really much of a, when he signed with the Titans during this whole free agency thing, it was a whole back and forth. Like, the Chiefs were in on it.
Yep.
A couple
Patriots.
of other teams, the Patriots were in on it. Other teams were offering him, less money as far as what the reporting is, if I can remember correctly, and the Titans were willing to spend more to land him.
Yep.
So how much was he willing? How much did he want the money versus how much did he want to win at the time? What does that mean for his mindset right now and what it means for next year? So it'd be interesting to see if he actually wants to get traded
right
at this point. But he's probably the number one option.
I would probably put the percentage chance. If the Titans are to trade somebody away, I would say D-Hop is probably 70%. That's the guy who's going to go. But again, I think it only makes sense to trade pieces away that you don't think are going to help you next year. So let's say Rand Carthon and Brian Callahan have already kind of made it known that they want to extend DeAndre Hopkins and they want to bring him back, and D-Hop seems to be on board with that. Might not make sense. Same with Ernest Jones. If you think he is a big part of your future on the defensive side of the ball, you don't do it because, again, whether it's Will Levis or a bridge quarterback or you take a guy in the first round, you want to keep as many of these veteran pieces who can help him as possible.
Yeah. They need an overhaul of the wide receiver core, though. It's too it's not sustainable long term.
Yeah, and that is true.
Between Ridley, Hopkins, and Boyd and Burks, I mean, there's nobody there that you can build around.
Right. 2 years from now, do we think any of those guys are going to be
chances are probably
on
not.
the team? Probably not.
Maybe Ridley, but probably not. And so, you got to find somebody who you can build around for the future and that you want to keep there, at least one piece. I mean, Ridley, maybe he's a short-term stopgap. Hopkins is on the older side.
Yeah,
Boyd signed a 1-year deal. He's on the older side. He's lacking explosion. Burks, we've already seen what Burks is at this point. You can't rely on him to build around moving forward. So they're going to need some type of wide receiver overhaul sooner than later.
I think it might be if the Titans don't take a quarterback in the first round, it has to be a wide receiver. You've got.
Well, people will already tell you right tackle.
That is true.
In the first round, people already want another tackle.
Yeah, I get it. Because tackle is
felt like we had this discussion this whole entire offseason already. Wide receiver versus tackle. So I don't know if we're going to be deja vu all over again.
I won't tell the right tackle story. You've got to take, you can't let your struggles picking first round wide receivers scare you from taking another one. And I get it's a new regime and everything with Rand Carthon, but man, has this organization sucked at picking wide receivers. I mean, think of all the first and second round picks that have been spent on receivers.
Capitalize those words.
Sucked.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, Kenny Britt, Kendall Wright, Dorial Green Beckham, Justin Hunter, Traylon Burks, obviously.
Yeah.
Corey Davis. Taywan Taylor was a third round pick, but still, like, A.J. Brown is the only time that this franchise has had success picking a wide receiver in the first 2 rounds in the last 15 years, and they traded him away for Traylon Burks for another chance to take a bad wide receiver. So they've got to find somebody, whoever their quarterback ends up being. You've got to find their partner in crime.
Yeah, and going back to the trade conversation real quick, like, yes, to the initial question you asked me at the beginning of this segment, if you're going to be true, like, sellers at the deadline, you get rid of D-Hop. And maybe if there's a way to do it, somehow get rid of Traylon Burks as well for a bag of footballs. And I remember it was during the New Orleans Saints preseason game against the Titans. Rand Carthon was talking to the television broadcast and mentioned these late round draft picks is where our scouting department is going to make their money. And a lot of these late round picks, they're starting to build up, starting to add up a little bit. So which means to Titans fans, hey, are we going to get some late round bloomers, some diamonds in the rough is kind of what the message is, not to myself. That's how I perceive it, that they're going to give to fans out there. So if that's the case, now I've talked about this off the air to you, and I've even said it on the weekend show. Is it a possibility of moving on from Big El Jefe down in the middle of the field? I mean, on the defensive side of the ball, I know we talked about it a little bit, but I told myself I wasn't going to say it too much, but he has a lot of value. There's a lot of value about that guy.
Let's get to that coming up next. We will go to the Jeffrey Simmons conversation of whether there is value in sending him away this year, because I think it's a conversation that should be had, even though it might not seem like the smartest thing to do, to trade away your probably most successful stalwart of a player, the guy who's been here the longest and done it the best for the last couple of years. But I think it's a conversation that deserves to be had. So we'll talk about that coming up next. Jake Lyman, Nick Frazier in for Jared Stillman. Max Hers coming up at the top of the hour to talk some Preds. Make sure you stick around for that. This week's Nashville's Best Deal is from Nashville's largest axe throwing venue, Bad Axe Throwing Nashville. Aim for a great time while enjoying curated cocktails from the full bar and a Northwoods-inspired menu with a Southern twist. Go to theGameNashville.com/deals to get half off a $30 gift card while supplies last. We'll keep talking Titans trades coming up next. You're on Stillman Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
speculation will immediately turn to. It goes without saying this is a championship caliber team, Shefty, and they just lost a critical piece. Realistically, is there a trade out there that they can make, be it now or sometime reasonably soon, to try to fill this void?
Well, let's say this. The Chiefs, Greeny, in other years have been very aggressive in this particular area. In each of the last 2 years, they have added a wide receiver before the trade deadline. They did it 2 years ago with Kadarius Toney. They did it again last year with McCole Hardman. And I would imagine that they'll make calls. And so when you start to make calls and you're in the position that the Chiefs will be with a strong record, you're going to be looking for teams that clearly have records that are not up to par, teams that'll be looking to add draft capital, knowing that the playoffs are realistic, players who could be in the last year or final years of their contract. So I think the first thoughts are you go to a team like Tennessee. It's in Miami tonight. It's trying to save its season. If they keep losing and they don't get their season turned around, could they eventually trade a guy like DeAndre Hopkins?
That was Adam Schefter back on Monday talking about possible moves for the Chiefs, who we talked about it. Hollywood Brown out for the year, and Rashee Rice, the thought was on Monday that he might be out for the year, maybe a possible partner in a DeAndre Hopkins trade. Jake Lyman, Nick Frazier in for Jared Stillman today. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3. The Game. We're talking possible trade candidates here, and DeAndre Hopkins clearly stands out as the top guy. And, you know, we said if the Titans lose to the Colts on Sunday, you're 1-4. You got at the Bills, at the Lions in back-to-back weeks after that. In that order, I believe. Yes, at Bills, at Lions. There's a good chance you could be 1-6. And heading into the trade deadline, you're probably out of it. I don't think you're coming back from 1-6. DeAndre Hopkins makes the most sense. We posed the question heading into the break. Would it make sense to make a move on Big Jeff Simmons? Has not had the production that maybe you were hoping for, but still has the reputation across the league. He was named by executives and coaches in ESPN, their preseason article, as the 4th best defensive tackle in the league. Has the reputation that could draw you a pretty big package in return. Nick, I know you have some strong thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, I love the phrase strike when the iron's hot. I mean, obviously Jeffrey Simmons has had some injuries in years past, and obviously this year with the elbow situation. But, you know, if the national media is thinking so highly on Jeffrey Simmons, you can easily cash in on a guy like this and get draft capital in return, because let's face it, the Titans are rebuilding in every facet. I mean, regardless of how good the defense is already, if you get rid of Jeffrey Simmons, yeah, it's going to be an unfortunate loss. But you have a guy like Tavondre Sweat, and after seeing him against Miami, granted it's Miami, they're not great either right now, he could be that Jeffrey Simmons going forward. And so then with that being said, you don't have to rely on the heavy money that Jeffrey Simmons kind of carries with him. You're still on a rookie deal with a guy like Tavondre Sweat, and you probably get a first-round pick out of Jeffrey Simmons and maybe some other picks in return as well. And having an extra first-round pick if you need a quarterback is certainly ammo that you want to have. We have mixed reactions on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Skyler and Ryan kind of on the same page. Skyler says trade Big Jeff for either a first or a second. Lacks production, and he hasn't taken advantage of his leadership role that he's had. Ryan kind of saying in the same breath that Simmons overrated, immature. They should trade him because the return might match his reputation rather than his actual production. And Ryan making a good point. Harold Landry, who doesn't get as much run as the face of the franchise and the face of that defense, his production's been a lot higher the last couple of years. I think they put out something today, the Titans, about Harold Landry's 3rd in the all-time sacks list. Yeah, he will probably be the Titans' all-time sack leader. Maybe even by the end of this year. I think he's 8 away. 7 or 8. He's a silent stud. He's a guy who doesn't like to talk to the media all that much. So that's probably a big reason why he's not the quote unquote face of the franchise. Mm-hmm. But Big Jeff, you say that they are in a rebuild phase. Yeah. I think if they believe that in the building, they would trade Jeffrey Simmons. But everything that they've done in the past 6 to 7 months hasn't shown that they are in a rebuild phase. You trade for L'Jarius Sneed. You sign Calvin Ridley to nearly a $100 million deal. You sign Lloyd Cushenberry to be one of the highest paid centers of all time. You go out and make all these moves that are kind of win now moves. It would feel kind of a little bit
I'm trying to think of the word here.
A lost cause.
Yeah,
in some
I
regard?
guess they're. It's on the tip of my tongue. They're kind of fighting against each other
Like
in
in
that way.
limbo,
Yeah,
like in
yeah.
limbo.
Like they don't know what they want to be, I guess is
Right.
what I'm saying. Is if they traded away Jeffrey Simmons, you made all these moves to win now and have all these veteran pieces around some of your younger guys that you're building up, and then you trade away the guy who's supposed to be your best player.
Yeah.
I get it that the return, if you're thinking only we need to find a way to get a quarterback, then I get it. If you can get a first-round pick for Jeffrey Simmons, you got 2. You can trade up. You can find yourself into a position where you can possibly get your quarterback of the future. But with this class, I'm not sure it really makes sense. Like,
Well, follow me on this real quick, Jake. We mentioned a little bit in the break, but say if the Titans are a team that's picking top 5, top 3, like say if that's the case, then maybe in the offseason, maybe it's not at the deadline, maybe at the offseason, the Titans end up trading Jeffrey Simmons. And maybe you get not a haul, but maybe you still get a first-round pick out of it. Maybe it's for this year or the following year or whatever it may be. So then you're looking at now multiple first-round draft picks out of that situation and maybe some second-round picks in return. Now you have a plethora of options of draft capital. And I'm not saying, that's going to fix it all in one offseason, but yet to me, it's a step in the right direction.
I think if they do that, that is Rand Carthon, Amy Adams Strunk. Contradicting is the word. Thank you, Texter. For some reason, Stadium Pulse is high. I couldn't think of the word. Yes, it's contradictory is what I was trying to say, that they're making all of these moves that feel win now, and then they trade away a guy who's seen as their best player around the league. Not just among fans. Executives picked him as the 4th best defensive tackle in the league. I think it would take Amy Adams Strunk and Rand Carthon basically admitting that they're not going to win for the next 2 or 3 years if they trade away Jeffrey Simmons.
I think this team can win without him. Like, I firmly believe that this team can win without Jeffrey Simmons.
I think they can, but you're trading away a known commodity for lottery tickets, which, as we've seen.
Well, no. To me, they're not lottery tickets if you believe a lot into your scouting department. The way Rand Carthon spoke about the scouting department, if he believes that much into them, they're not lottery tickets to me.
I think John Robinson believed a lot in his scouting department when he traded A.J. Brown.
Well,
I'm just saying, like,
you're not wrong, but I mean, to me, the way I'm hearing it, it sounds like there's a lot of belief in that scouting department. And this, I'm not saying all these picks are for sure things, but yet they are, I'd say, more probable. I mean, everything's a gamble in life, but I'd say there's a little bit more optimism on those picks than there is question marks.
I just don't know if what you've done throughout these past 6 months, if you can afford to do it. Like,
it's fair.
It feels like you're just completely 180 backtracking. And I get it. If the record isn't good, if you are 1-6, then clearly you failed in your attempt to win now, which that is everything that they've done has shown that they thought that they could win this year. And so far they aren't. That could change. They could figure things out during the bye week. Will Levis could start to develop. I'm not sure I believe that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But I think it's a far stretch from, hey, let's trade away some of these expiring contracts, maybe getting a little bit of extra draft capital for next year. Like trading Kevin Byard last year. Maybe wasn't popular in the moment, but one of those picks turned into Jarvis Brownlee Jr., which could end up being a starting cornerback for you for the next 4 or 5 years. If you can make a trade like that, that helps you moving forward without trading away a guy who's supposed to be the cornerstone of your franchise. Is he, and has he lived up to that hype? Not lately.
No.
But he's got the talent to do it. We've seen it. Like that Bengals playoff game, he was the most unstoppable man on that field for 60 minutes. They ended up losing because Ryan Tannehill decided that he was the most unstoppable man on that field and was going to keep throwing interceptions. But Jeff Simmons has proven that he can do it. It hasn't happened lately. There's been the off the field stuff, but that can all change. And I think it doesn't make a ton of sense with bringing in these veterans, Ridley, Snead, Ernest Jones, Chidobe Awuzie. It doesn't make a ton of sense to trade away a guy who's supposed to be part of that core.
Well, yeah. I mean, we get back to the conversation, though, about just trading and options out there. Like, we even had the conversation on the weekend. Like, if there were people you'd trade on either the offensive side of the ball or defensive side of the ball, and like Connor and you both, and even myself, were thinking, well, who do you trade on the defensive side of the ball? And
Yeah.
no names came to mind. And for me, it was Jeffrey Simmons because he carries the most weight of any sort of name out there on defense and also in the trade market. So that's kind of where I'm at on this conversation. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm a Mississippi State fan. Love Jeffrey Simmons. Was great in Starkville. I would hate to see him leave, but at the same time, you got to think about the future for the franchise. And if that is a trade that helps this franchise go in the right direction, I'm all for it.
Jeff on our text line makes a good point too. Do you guys know why Harold Landry is able to get a bunch of his sacks? It's because Jeffrey Simmons. The one against the Bears is the one that stands out. When he takes the full right side of the Bears offensive line with him, Landry just sneaks through the back door and is able to sack Caleb Williams.
It's true, but you could probably also do it with Tavondre Sweat. And he's almost twice the size of Jeffrey Simmons for the most part. Am I right or wrong? I mean,
I think we need to see a Jeffrey Simmons breakout game in the next week or two.
Yeah.
And he is known for getting the best of Quentin Nelson up there with Indianapolis. Like those battles, typically there is a nice clip of Jeffrey Simmons ragdolling Quentin Nelson somewhere. Maybe that will be what he needs coming back from his Tommy John injury that he had, which is kind of crazy. I guess you don't throw the football. You don't need to get surgery.
Yeah. I wonder how that happens.
He said it was friendly fire. So I guess one of his teammates
maybe he just got hit weird and it hyperextended his elbow.
I don't know. But it is funny that different sports, different reactions. Like Tommy John surgery in baseball, you're done for
Dunzo.
a year and a half. Most of the time.
Maybe he was practicing first pitch for a baseball game. I don't know. Could throw your arm out that way, kiddo. You don't want to do that.
I think we need to see Jeffrey Simmons prove that he can still be the guy that we all knew him to be a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
And if he can have a game with the sack and a half and a couple of tackles for loss, this all will quiet, I think. Because I think that is a group you can build around up front with Sweat, Simmons, and Landry for the next 2 or 3 years. And hopefully, if you can get the quarterback, whether Levis develops or whoever it ends up being, that can be a front four, three of a front four that can really make problems for opposing quarterbacks. So we'll see. Would it shock me if we got a Sheftbaum or Ian Rappaport tweet saying Jeffrey Simmons has been traded? I don't know if it would shock me, but it would be very surprising.
Yeah.
I could see it happening. Don't expect it to happen. I would think that Hopkins is probably the guy. We'll take a quick break here. We will wrap up hour number 1 with Dr. Crane on the other side. Maybe get into some college football here.
Love some of that.
Yeah, we got a big month of October coming up here that could have a lot of playoff implications. So we'll talk about that coming up next. Jake Lyman, Nick Frazier in for Jared Stillman today. Stillman Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Wrapping up our first hour here on Stillman and Company. Jake Lyman in for Jared Stillman today. Big thanks to Dr. Crane, Nick Frazier, for spending this first hour with me.
It's always fun. Always fun.
Talk some baseballs, talk some Titans. We'll get into a little bit of college football before we let you get out of here. Max Hers coming up in about 10 minutes. We will spend a full hour previewing the Predator season with Max Hers, who obviously does a lot of the pre and post game. He'll do the road games on the radio for the Preds this year. So excited for Max. And then don't forget, TD coming up from 4 to 6. Excited to spend 2 TD power hours with Teron Davenport. And again, you can get your questions in for TD all show long. We will get to those coming up at 5 o'clock. Our phone lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. Quickly, before we get you out of here, Nick Frazier, what a month of college football we have upon us here in October.
Can't wait.
It's we're going to find out a lot about some of these top teams and whether they're going to be locks for the playoffs in these next few weeks. This week, not a ton of huge games. Like game day's going to Missouri A&M, which it's a fine game. Missouri, probably a playoff contender. A&M, maybe not so much.
Yeah. I mean, A&M, I think they're hitting another stride with Marcel Reed as their quarterback.
Right.
I mean, local proxy.
Nashville guy.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to take a little time for that, but I don't know. I think Missouri, I don't think they're a really true contender for me.
Vandy took them to double OT. Probably should have taken them to triple OT. Would have had that 2-point conversion shootout if they were able to knock down that field goal to tie it. Vandy's got Alabama on Saturday coming to town. Maybe a letdown spot. I don't know.
Upset City, maybe.
We'll see what
take
the
the goalpost to the Cumberland.
Commodores coming off a bye week. Bama coming off an emotional win against Georgia. I'm not saying it, but I mean, I think it might be a little more competitive early on, at least, than some people may think. But coming up these next 2 weekends, I mean, does it get much better than this? October 12th, Ohio State, Oregon, probably the 2 best teams in the Big Ten.
Mm-hmm.
Penn State, USC, probably the 2nd or the 3rd and 4th best teams in the Big Ten. Texas, Oklahoma, Red River rivalry, first time as SEC opponents.
It's going to be fun. I think Texas might be putting up a 30 spot. I don't know.
They could. And Quinn Ewers is expected to be back after Arch Manning got a couple of games to get his feet wet a little bit against some lower talent.
Struggled a little bit against Mississippi State, but they ended up, taking the game away.
They didn't cover, I don't believe, but they did enough to win. And I thought heading into the season, looking at that schedule, I thought that was going to be the best weekend of college football. But how about the next one? October 19th, 3rd Saturday in October, we got Bama, Tennessee, as always. And that could be a top 3 matchup. If Bama takes care of their business and if Tennessee can beat Arkansas and Florida these next 2 weeks, that's 2 possibly undefeated top 2 or 3 teams going at it in Knoxville. Texas, Georgia might be the next 2 in the conference.
Yeah. And
then Miami, Louisville for the top spot in the ACC.
I mean, it can't get any better than that. As the season has progressed, we've now seen how this schedule is going to unfold. And like, you're right. October 19th is a solid week for college football. I think it's probably even better than October the 12th because the Penn State UCLA matchup you're getting October the 12th is basically saying, so who's the 2nd best team or 3rd best team in the conference?
Yeah.
That's what you're getting out of that. And I think it's a true test that weekend in October 12th for Oregon and Ohio State because you're able to see, is Oregon true contenders in the Big Ten or is Ohio State just that team every year that always puts up 40, 50 points against teams besides Oregon, and they play a close game against them. So we'll see about that game.
You might have 3 separate top 5 matchups in a week span between Ohio State, Oregon, Tennessee, Alabama, Texas, and Georgia.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's special. And before the season began, like I even predicted on the weekend show, like Tennessee 11-1 was the preseason prediction.
You did call it.
I have them beating Alabama and losing to Georgia. So this is going to be an interesting matchup coming up on the 19th.
And that Miami Louisville game, the ACC got what they wanted. They'll have an undefeated Miami heading into that one probably.
Should be a one-loss.
Should be a one-loss Miami. We won't get into that. Who do you see after those 2 giant weekends? Because you pick any 6 of those teams, all 6 of those teams in those big games: Ohio State, Oregon, Bama, Tennessee, Texas, Georgia. Those are probably your 6 best teams in college football right now, unless I'm missing somebody. Who do you think comes out as the presumptive favorite after those 2 weeks where you've got those 3 heavyweight matchups?
I think you're still going to have Texas as the, I guess, not heavy favorite, but slight favorite to win it all.
Yeah.
After all this, I mean, it's like going through a gauntlet. I honestly think Tennessee is going to be out there with Texas. I think it's going to be a 1-2 punch with those guys. Like, I'm not knocking Alabama or Georgia, but Tennessee has made a strong push for being a true contender for a college football playoff national championship.
I mean, if you look at the results of this, let's say Oregon beats Ohio State. Oregon hasn't looked great this year, but let's say they beat Ohio State. Let's say Georgia beats Texas and Tennessee beats Alabama. Tennessee could be the number 1 team in the country heading into late October.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
I mean, I'm not going to say it smells like 98, but I mean, just some people out there, you never know. The big question mark for me with Tennessee coming into the season was the running back room, and Sampson has really just shown that he can be a true running back for sure. I mean, 69 carries on the season, 449 and 10 touchdowns. Like, that's impressive, especially in this high-powered, high-octane Josh Heupel offense.
I mean, there hasn't been a letdown yet. Every game they've come out and they've taken care of business. Arkansas this weekend on the road, coming off a bye week. We'll see if Tennessee can keep it rolling. Again, not a great week at college football this week. I don't know if we even have too many top 25 matchups. Again, we mentioned Missouri A&M, but you got a lot to look forward to, college football fans, because those 2 back-to-back weekends, that might be the best 2 weekends of college football that we've ever had.
Yeah.
Game Day's got their hands full deciding where they want to go those 2 weekends. I would guess they're going to be, I assume it's in Eugene, that Ohio State-Oregon game.
It has to be.
And then
for game day, they have to.
I would think they'd go to Eugene and then probably Knoxville after that for Alabama and Tennessee.
Man, oh man. GBO all over the televisions.
That place will be rocking.
You got that right.
Rocking. Nick, thanks for joining me for this first hour.
Appreciate
it's been fun.
It. Enjoy your rest of your hours on the show today.
I mean, it's like 3 separate shows. We love it. We get to just have fun here. And if you want to hear more with me and Dr. Crane, Force Company, 9 to 11 on Saturday.
Indeed.
We will send you into your college football Saturday this week. And we'll be back every Saturday. So thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
We'll let you get out of here. Coming up next, Max Hers. We're going to spend a full hour on the Nashville Predators as they are a week away from their season opener. We can't wait for a new season of Smashville hockey. We'll talk with Max coming up next. Jake Lyman in for Jared Stillman here on Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063, The Game, broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Jake Lyman with you. We are rotating through co-hosts today, filling in for Jared Stillman. Thanks to Nick Frazier for joining us for the first hour, and now we've got a full Preds second hour as Max Hers joins us now. Max,
hi,
appreciate
Jake.
you coming on.
Yeah, my pleasure. Shana Tova to Jared Stillman if he's listening at home. And happy to be here.
Should be a fun hour. Again, we're gonna preview this Preds season. I mean, 7 days away from the opener at home against Dallas, if I'm not mistaken.
Week from tonight.
Week from tonight. Crazy. It feels like yesterday that series against Vancouver ended, and then it was straight into the draft and free agency and the draft and all that, and then now we're here. I can't wait.
It did not feel like yesterday to me. It felt like a long offseason.
For you, who's around it every day, I'm sure that the offseason goes by slow. Like for me with Vandy women's basketball, it feels like we've been off forever. But for me, it feels like yesterday I was watching the Preds play the Canucks. So I'm excited to finally see this new look Preds team on the ice as a full unit for a meaningful game next week. And again, coming up against the Stars for the home opener next Thursday. You just got back from Raleigh yesterday, preseason game. Preds win at 6-4 over the Hurricanes. That was kind of a look at what that full Preds team is going to look like. And, putting up 6 goals, I don't think you can ever complain about that.
Yeah, top 2 lines and top 2 D pairs went, and it was the first game of the preseason for Brady Shea, who's new to the team, then Roman Josi, Philip Forsberg, Gus Nyquist were the last guys who had not played in a preseason game yet, and Alex Carrier, too. So some guys still had not played, still 2 more preseason games after this. The only downside of all those guys going, the Hurricanes did not field an NHL team. They did not reciprocate with any of their notable NHL players. So it was fun to see the Preds take advantage of that in a lot of ways. I think Andrew Brunette is a little tired of other teams not dressing the NHLers when the Preds show up for these last couple preseason games, but they did what they were supposed to do, and there was a lot of good. I mean, it's preseason, wins and losses don't matter a ton, but one of the things that Andrew Brunette said before the game that he wanted to see with the top 2 lines, top 2 D pairs, it's the first time in a game Steven Stamkos and Jonathan Marchessault would be playing together. He wanted to see the chemistry, and they certainly had it.
Yep.
And Marchessault has been the guy in preseason, and I just maintain that Predators fans are going to fall in love with Jonathan Marchessault.
I mean, after the offseason that they had, I mean, we could do the Jared, Steven Stamkos, Jonathan Marchessault, and Brady Shea. It's hard not to get excited because you already had your cornerstone guys in Forsberg, Josi, Saros, and then you bring in 3 established NHLers who immediately take this team from, hey, maybe you're in the middle of the pack in the West to a contender. And I have a feeling that you're going to struggle to find a night at Bridgestone Arena where it's not packed to the brim.
Oh, yeah.
This
Better
season. It should be, because Barry Trotz and Andrew Brunette have basically said, hey, we're going after it this year and next year. So I really hope Preds fans get behind them, especially early on in the season, and get out there to Bridgestone Arena for some of these games.
Yeah, two kind of big picture. I don't know if these are stats, but like factoids about those acquisitions that really hammers it home for me. The NHL provided this one. It was the first time ever that 2 players who scored 40 goals in the previous season both joined the same team in the same offseason, which is nuts. And then to take it another step back, the Predators currently have the all-time franchise goal-scoring leader for 3 different franchises, not just active players. Philip Forsberg is the Predators' all-time goal-scoring leader. Steven Stamkos is the Lightning's all-time goal-scoring leader. And Jonathan Marchessault is the Knights' all-time goal-scoring leader. It's just insane to think about.
That is crazy. It reminds me of on Sunday Night Football watching them say like, oh, Derrick Henry now has the longest rushing touchdown for 2 different teams. It's like it is crazy because it's like in baseball terms, it's like bringing in 2 35 home run guys in one offseason to join a guy who already has it. Like the offense, and we'll get into the power play a little bit, but I mean, having a power play with Stamkos, Marchessault, Forsberg, O'Reilly, and Josi, outside of Edmonton, I don't think you're going to find a group much better than that.
Yeah. And Barry Trotz said on day 1 of training camp, and he said this to the team as well. He came to the press conference and said, This is what I just said to the team. Now I want to say it to the media. He said, until we become a good team in real life, we're just a good team on paper, and this is fantasy
That's a good
hockey.
point.
But in fantasy hockey, we look pretty good.
We're pretty good.
Yeah. So Barry Trotz has drafted a good fantasy team, but again, power play is one area where until they do it in games and are producing, which takes some time to get there and takes some reps, which I think the last week of training camp, we saw it today at practice at Centennial. They're drilling a lot of power play. They drilled power play entries and build out for the first time, and they're going to be working on that a ton as they get down to the players they have right now. If they don't want to make another cut, they don't have to. They have an opening night roster. They could make another cut if they want to, but right now they have 21 skaters and 2 goalies. And if they don't want to cut anybody else, this could be their opening night group with a week to go.
And Andrew Burnett makes a good point. Like, if you just went into Chell right now and played a game with the Preds, you'd probably do pretty well. Like, I'm sure all those guys are pretty high overalls, but you do have to have some patience because a lot of these guys haven't played together. And maybe it doesn't look as explosive and as intimidating as you expect it to be through the first week or so. But I think once you get later into the season, that's going to be a really dynamic power play. You talk about how crazy it is to get Marchessault and Stamkos together. I mean, we talk about how the NFL legal tampering period is kind of funny because it's like the second it opens, you see signings come in, and it's like, man, they really negotiated that fast. The NHL free agency, it felt like half of the free agents were off the board within 5 minutes. It was awesome, especially, following the Predators. But it is crazy how fast it went from, oh, it's Stamkos. Oh, it's Marchessault. Oh, it's Shea. Like, boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, it was fun watching TSN, not Trade Center. That would be the trade deadline, but whatever they call their free agency show, which we get to stream here in the beautiful United States of America on ESPN Plus. They flash the free agents on their bottom line throughout the show in groups of 5, 1 through 50. So 10 different groups of 5. And that first group had 3 big old Preds logos on it. That is a good feeling. I took a lot of pictures of my TV when that was happening.
I remember seeing the picture of like top 5 available free agents, and you see the Sabretooth up there over and over and over again. Barry Trotz going all in 2024, and hopefully the Preds can use this video game fantasy level lineup and get themselves into contention for a cup this year. Again, the opener is a week away. We're going to keep talking Preds for the entirety of this hour with Max Hers in studio, Jake Lyman in for Jared Stillman. If you have questions for Max Hers,
yes, hit us up.
Yeah, get us on our text or phone line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. We'd love to hear from you. More with Max coming up next here on Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Jake Lyman in for Jared Stillman today. Rolling along here on hour number 2 with Max Hurst. We're talking all things Predators here from 3 to 4. And then Teron Davenport will join us for some Titans talk from 4 to 6. So we're covering everything you want to hear about today on Stillman and Company. If you have questions for Max about the Preds, make sure you text us or call us 615-737-1025. Our phone lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Max, we spent the first segment kind of talking about the excitement around this team. You bring in all of these free agents. You still have your core of guys who have made this team competitive over the past 5 to 10 years. But what is going to be the key to this team living up to those expectations and, being a competitor heading into the Stanley Cup playoffs next spring?
I just think the guys who are expected to produce the offense need to be the leading producers of the offense. And we saw it with the Preds last year. When the top line was going, which was more often than not, 48 goals for Philip Forsberg. When those guys scored, the Preds performed well. And then in the playoffs, it didn't quite happen that way. The games were tight and low scoring. UC Saros played well, but he didn't really get the goal support. And the Preds still almost won that series, but they didn't score on the power play. They gave up some goals in specialty situations, as how Andrew Brunette has synthesized that series over and over. Even though we're a couple months out of it, he still looks at it the same way. I mean, they gave up a goal with the net empty. They gave up some special teams goals. They gave them an overtime goal, and that's what changed the entire series. So I think if the horses are the horses, they'll be able to keep it going. And the way things look with the lines in training camp right now, they could have a blueprint for a true top 9, which is something that Andrew Brunette and Barry Trotz have spoken about quite a bit over the last 16 months since they both took their current jobs. And the third line being key to round out that top 9, Colton Sissons with Phil Tomasino and Luke Evangelista on the wings. That line has looked really good when they've played together in preseason practices.
Well, that leads right into Derek from Nolensville on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. You wanted to know who's your best guest of third and fourth line. So you mentioned the third line there. Fourth line, it was kind of that character line, the gritty line that started all of those playoff games down the stretch last year. Who do you see starting on that fourth line for the Preds?
Yeah, well, I settled on the starting line as the nickname for them, just because they started every game for a month and a half or whatever it was. I don't know if you watch Shoresy, but the Gyms was what I was going with there. They're the tone setters. So for any of my Shoresy hockey show viewers out there. But yeah, third line, they've been very consistent with the lines, by the way.
Yep.
I'll just go through them all. Top line is the same. Ryan O'Reilly, Philip Forsberg, Gus Nyquist. They're not going to split those guys up unless there's a reason they need to get somebody else going or whatever it may be. Second line, Tommy Novak centering Steven Stamkos and Jonathan Marchessault. Massive opportunity for Novak, obviously, to be the playmaker and the distributor there. So that's the quote-unquote second line. I mean, those are the top 2 lines.
Yep.
Order them however you want. But the returning line gets the 1 spot as far as I'm concerned for typing it out and tweeting it out.
It feels like a 1A, 1B. Like, there's not really much of a talent difference there, but yes, I think the line with Forsberg on it probably is going to be the quote-unquote top line.
Right. And someone on the second line, Steven Stamkos, has 7 40-goal seasons and a 60-goal season to his name. So, yeah. But, I mean, it means something. Like, there are players in the NHL who, have ego. Like, when the line sheet gets printed out that goes up in the room, their line needs to be the first line. I don't think there's anybody like that on the Preds this season.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would be mad if they see their name printed next to the second line, but just in terms of the tenure and being the franchise guy, like Steven Stamkos is the most established and the most surefire Hall of Famer on this team. But Philip Forsberg has been the Predators guy for so long that I feel like he's probably the first liner, even though, I mean, you look at those 2 lines, I don't really see too much of a difference there. Like, you've got goal scoring on both of them. It's probably going to be about even throughout the year.
Yeah, it's a loaded top 6, kind of out of nowhere. Last year was really just a top line.
Yeah.
And that was it. So that's the top 6. Derek asked about the bottom 6. Sissons, Evangelista, Tomasino has been the third line. I've really liked the way they looked. And Colton Sissons got asked in a press conference last week, you've been playing with those 2 guys. Just what's it like being with 2 of the younger players on the team who are hopefully coming into their own? Tomasino trying to still prove himself as a full-time NHLer. Luke Evangelista has finally aged out of rookie status. Feels like he's been the rookie forever. And I mean, he's still only 22. So He's still got the rookie tag maybe a little bit with so many of the older veterans on this team. But Sissons was so funny about it. He couldn't hold back a smile, first of all, saying, I think we've played really well together. And I couldn't agree more. They look really good. They've generated a lot. They've had some really fun interchanges, good passing, good movement. And all three of those guys are responsible for it. So I think Sissons, when you get him with those more offensive wingers, will score a lot more. He had 15 goals last year, which was a career high. And he did not score in the last full month of the regular season.
Wow.
The last goal he scored was in LA, which was, I believe, in early March, either late February or early March. So he had a career high, even though he went into that kind of defensive role towards the end of the season. So I think Sissons will be unlocked offensively. I think that's definitely the third line they're going to roll with. Tomasino looks very good. So I think Tomasino, Sissons, Evangelista is the third line. And the fourth line they've shown has just had the one change from last year. Kiefer Sherwood has gone to the Canucks in free agency, and he got a great contract. So props to Kiefer Sherwood. Really happy for him. Mark Jankowski has taken that spot with Mike McCarron and Cole Smith. Then Juuso Parssinen, if they had to outfit a regular season lineup tonight, would be the 13th forward as a scratch. But he's someone who I think could fit on any line if he's playing his best.
Michael McCarron might be my favorite player on the team just because of the big sexy moniker. Like when you, especially when you're on the call for some of these games and you just yell out big sexy when he scores a goal. I love it. When I'm in here doing highlights, it always makes me laugh. I'm like, that is an awesome nickname to have, especially as a hockey player. Like, I feel like it's such a hockey nickname to have.
But he also goes by the Big Show amongst the team as well. And Big Mac.
Was it you who tweeted? Maybe it was Alex Doherty. I think it was Alex Doherty who tweeted that I guess on the online Brady Shea's nickname is Shazy, but they spelled the last name the same way. So it's SKJEISY. Like that's how they spelled the nickname as Shazy. I was like, I feel like you could change the spelling to be phonetic at that point.
I need to get in touch with the people who put these nicknames on Hockey Reference, which is what you're talking
about. Yeah.
Like, they put them in parentheses. I was showing this to Hal yesterday, actually, before the game. His is Skillsy, but it's misspelled. It's spelled Skill SIE, and he spells it in his Twitter handle SY. And he's like, it's right there on Twitter. But we started the conversation because Rocco Grimaldi played against the Preds last night. Preds legend, who a lot of people here love. But on Hockey Reference, the only nickname they list for Rocco Grimaldi is Rock Shrimp. It's like, where did that come from? Like, I know it's presumably because he's one of the shortest players in the NHL, but like, we've never heard that before.
There's got to be some nicknames on there that no one has ever said before, but Hockey Reference, they're just like, what would this guy's nickname be?
But like Luke Evangelista, as far as I know, like Pretty Boy Vincenzo is not up there, but like that should definitely be up there.
That is also one of the best ones.
And Ryan O'Reilly has like 8.
Yeah, the Factor.
But I don't think Fact Daddy is up there, which is my favorite. And that's one that actually gets used too.
Quickly before we hit another break here, the goaltending situation. Obviously, UC Saros signs the big extension in the offseason, but no more Kevin Lankinen, who was you felt like you had a really solid backup. Now you have Scott Wedgwood, who may be more of a question mark, even though he is a veteran guy behind UC Saros.
I think it's actually almost the exact same situation in my mind. And they got Wedgwood for a 2-year deal. He's going into his age 32 season. He's totally happy as a backup, but if he needs to start a lot of games, he could do it for you. And Wedgwood did it for the Stars last year when Jake Ottinger was hurt around New Year's. Wedgwood started 11 straight games and 12 out of 13 straddling New Year's last season. And he won 6 of the first 8, ended up being 7-3-2. The Stars were in those games, including a loss to the Preds, but he can definitely do it. He was kind of a late debuter. He was really the third goalie for the Devils, which was his original organization, but I think he's a good fit. He's got the classic funny backup goalie thing going, which Kevin Lankinen did in a lot of ways too. And him and UC Saros are close. I think he's a great locker room guy, and I think he'll give you everything you need from a backup. And Willie Donick and I have this discussion all the time. Willie gets very worried and nervous about a lot of things, as we all know, and he's always worried about the number of games UC Saros will play. And it's just not a bad thing if he plays a lot of games because he's really good, and the Preds are paying him a lot of money,
to
and
play
the
a lot of
Preds
games.
Want to win. So
it makes sense.
Yeah.
And, you know, Derek and Willie on DVD earlier. They took their victory lap with the Avengers theme song, as the Avengers ended up being correct about what would happen this offseason with the goaltending situation, that the commitment would come to UC Saros, and Nick Frazier behind the board got the Avengers theme song going for Willie.
So Willie was wrong.
Willie was right. No, Willie was part of the Avengers. When everybody was saying trade UC Saros and go with Yaroslav Askarov, Willie and Derek Mason, they were the Avengers, and they were backing UC Saros. So they took a little victory lap at the end of the show today.
Yeah, it's funny, like looking at a New Jersey Devils preseason lineup, it's like, oh, half these guys were rumored to be traded for UC Saros at one point. And they're all still on the Devils, except Alexander Holtz is on the Golden Knights now. So other than that, they all still are.
UC Saros sticking around in Smashville, signed a big deal this year.
As he should.
And as he should. He will be in goal for, I would say, at the very least, most of the Preds games this year, probably more than that. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. If you have questions for Max, you can text or call. Our phone lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. We'll keep talking Preds on the other side. Going to look at some of the young guys. We know the big names who are going to be on the Preds this year, but who are the guys who can accent that and be maybe the key to the Preds making a run this year? We'll talk about that coming up next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Let's talk about Window Nation. That's right. It's October, which means the weather is finally not too hot, not too cold, which means it's perfect time to replace the windows in your home. If you're thinking about replacing your windows, there are tons of companies out there that are putting things in your mailbox saying, oh, no, try our deal, try this. I can't tell you about those companies, but I can tell you about Window Nation. And I can tell you that Window Nation is an honest company. How honest? They came all the way out to my house, gave me the demonstration of all of their great windows, their energy efficient models, their good, better, best models. And then they said, your windows do not need replacing. You're actually okay. And I said, that is an honest company. So get with Window Nation, because right now you can buy 2 windows and you'll get 2 free. For every 2 you'll buy, you'll get 2 free. Plus pay nothing for 24 months. 0 down, no interest, no payments, 24 months. Hurry right now, because the sale ends October 31st. So schedule an in-home estimate by calling the pros at Window Nation, 866-90Nation, or visiting windownation.com. That's 866-90Nation, windownation.com.
Tune into 102.5, 106.3, The Game this Saturday at 11 a.m. for our college football game of the week, Missouri versus Texas A&M, presented by Twin Peaks Restaurants. Take your tailgate to Twin Peaks, home of 29-degree drafts and wall-to-wall sports. Jake Lyman in for Jared Stillman today, spending this whole 3 o'clock hour with Max Hers talking Predators. Lots to get to with Nashville. The Preds getting ready for their opener coming up on Thursday of next week. Still a couple more preseason games to get to. I believe one more with Carolina, one more with Tampa. Is that it?
Home preseason game, 4 o'clock on Saturday against the Hurricanes. If you're around, come to the game. It was a packed house last Saturday. It was a lot of fun. So this Saturday at 4, and then Monday.
The makeup game.
Yeah, Saturday was supposed to be last preseason game. So Monday at 6, Preds at Lightning in a game that was moved because of the weather hitting Tampa at the time. So that will be the final preseason game in the entire NHL.
Wow.
Because of the reschedule. And
rounding it out.
Then only 2 more days between that and opening night.
And Tuesday is like the opener, right? Like Florida, Boston, I think is they're raising the banner.
There are 3 games on Tuesday. Same as they did last year. Preds were a part of this last year. 3 games on ESPN, which I love. It starts at, I think, 3:30, and it goes all the way past midnight for the last game. So it's something that I think ESPN should do more throughout the season. I think they're only doing it on opening night. But, yeah, there are 3 games next Tuesday, and there actually are regular season games tomorrow and Saturday in Europe. Devils Sabres in Prague tomorrow, I think 11 our time, either 11 or noon, and then Saturday earlier, noon. Thank you, Ian. Noon tomorrow, and then I think 9 a.m. Saturday. Those are on NHL Network.
Correct.
But those are regular season games. Yeah.
It's just like the was it Padres and Dodgers? They were in like Seoul or something and played a full series, then came back, played more spring training games, and then actually got into the season.
Well, the Preds have the distinction of playing in Japan. And what year was that, Ian? 1999, 2000, 2001?
Something like that.
Yeah. Preds and Penguins in Japan. Those were regular season games, right?
I think so. Yeah.
It's cool. Grow the game. And Nick Frazier and I were talking earlier in the show that this is the best time of year, October. You got football in full swing.
That was a good take.
You got playoff baseball, and now you've got hockey and basketball starting up again. College basketball starts in a few weeks. Fall, I think, is the best time in the sports calendar. March and April is great, but I think this is the best time.
Yeah, in the first hour of the show, when you were with Frazier, Jake, you had one really good take and one awful take. The great take was that October is the best sports month of the year, which I absolutely agree with. First month of the NHL has it's either October or April. Baseball and hockey are my 2 biggest pro leagues that I follow.
Yeah.
You get the first month of one to mix in with playoffs of the other.
It's awesome.
But I think October gets it because of football, obviously.
Yeah, you've got all NFL, all college football, midseason, plus playoff baseball, plus you get some of those
NBA too.
Is it the sports equinox? I'm sure we'll get one of those throughout the next couple of weeks.
But anyway, your terrible take, which I have to tell everyone what the terrible take was, that you said Jackson Merrill is going to win Rookie of the Year over Paul Skeens.
I could be wrong. It's gonna be close. It will not be unanimous one way or the other. I know that. But
look, if the aliens came to Earth today and challenged us to baseball for the fate of the planet, would Paul Skeens be on the mound? I think he would be. Would Jackson Merrill be in center field?
Did you watch Tarek Skubal the other day? I don't know.
He come out of the pen.
Yeah, depends how many left-handed aliens there are.
That's true. Yeah, you gotta mix and match.
All right, back to hockey.
Back
I'm
to
sure Jared
hockey.
is mad at us.
We've talked about some of the big names. Let's talk about some of the young guys. You mentioned Luke Evangelista, Tommy Novak. I think those 2 guys are going to be pretty crucial to this team taking the next step and building off of the excitement. Yes, you need your stars to step up, but they can't do everything. I think seeing continued growth from Evangelista and Novak on those second and third lines is going to be huge for this team.
Yeah, it's so funny that Novak is still a young guy. He's 27, but just in terms of NHL experience, he's young. He debuted late. He was an overager. He was in the minors for a while, coming up through the Preds org, and the Preds were patient with him. He was patient with the Preds. They developed him, and now he gets to play with Jonathan Marchessault and Steven Stamkos to start the year. So, I think Tommy Novak is an unbelievable success story, and I think Novak not having to be the goal scorer on his line for the first time ever in the NHL is going to be huge for him, because the way he slows the game down and distributes, he needs guys on his wings who can score so he can be differential.
doesn't get much better than Steven
Yeah.
Stamkos and Jonathan Marchessault.
Yeah, that will play. That will absolutely play. So, I mean, that's over 800 NHL goals on his wings.
Crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, we mentioned two, now three franchise leaders in goals scored between Forsberg, Stamkos, and Marchessault. Tommy Novak, his job definitely got a lot easier this season. Some of the guys on the blue line, we mentioned Tanner Molendyk during the break there, and I want to talk about him a little bit. Former first-round pick, young guy, and I believe I saw this week that if he didn't make the NHL roster, he would go back to Saskatoon and play in the CHL.
Yes.
But you said that they don't have to make any cuts right now. He is on the roster, and that's a guy who I think they believe is going to be a staple on the blue line for a pretty long time.
Yeah, so right now, the Preds have 8 defensemen in training camp, and I will start all this by saying that does not include Spencer Stastny, who is listed on the roster. He has not reported to training camp due to personal reasons. Team has not given any other information about that. No timeline, nothing like that. So Spencer Stastny is excluded from that conversation for now because he hasn't been here, and we hope everything's well with him. I have no idea what is keeping him out of camp, and again, like I said, the team is not providing any more comments. So Spencer Stastny is not there for now. That opens up a pretty much assured spot on the roster. I mean, I think most people were assuming Stastny was going to make the team out of camp. So they have 8 defensemen right now. And the interesting moving parts of all this are at the bottom, like you said. Tanner Molendyk is the name of intrigue. He was drafted in the first round last year with the first round pick the Preds got from the Oilers for Matthias Ekholm. And almost immediately after that draft, once his junior season got going, it was like, how did this guy fall to 24? Like, the Preds got other things in that Ekholm trade, but if Molendyk pans out the way that the Preds hope he pans out as a long-term NHLer and hopefully a top pair defenseman, they think, that 1-for-1 with Ekholm is a fair trade. I mean, Ekholm was top 10 Norris last year and well-deserved, and Molendyk, the Preds think, could develop into something like that. So it's a matter of whether or not they choose to keep him and whether or not he makes his NHL debut. The rule here is he can play up to 9 NHL games before he loses a year off of his entry-level contract rather than going back to juniors. So he can stay with the Preds. He cannot go to an affiliated team. He cannot go to the Milwaukee Admirals until the junior season is over. So the Predators can keep him for up to 9 games without losing a year off his contract, then send him back to the Saskatoon Blades in the Western League. And I don't think they know what they're doing yet. I mean, they still have another week of practice, but they have the 5 returning NHL defensemen plus Brady Shea. Shea and Yossi is the top pair. Lozon and Carrier back together as the second pair. Luke Schenn, you figure, will be on the third pair. Then 3 other guys, Dante Fabro, who was in and out of the lineup last season, and I thought performed really well on the times that he was in and deserves to be in there as much as possible. Then you've got Mark Del Gaizo, who made his NHL debut last year, played 9 games in 2 separate call-ups with the teams. Preds love him. He's another piece that they want to keep. But also, Del Gaizo would have to go through waivers to get to Milwaukee.
Right.
So that's a big piece in this as well. And that's why they have 8 right now. So you figure Molendyk, the decision comes first. But there is a chance that they go into opening night with that roster of 8 defensemen. And they've already cut it down to 13 forwards. So they have room for 8 D-men.
And maybe it's a situation where you kind of wait and see on what happens with Spencer Stastny. Again, we hope that everything's okay with him, but you don't know the situation there, when he's going to rejoin the team, when he'd be ready to play. Maybe you wait it out through those 8-9 games and then make a decision on Molendyk. Because if you can, you might as well, and give yourself that depth and give that young player some experience at the NHL level that is a little bit different than if he went back to play for the Blades right to start the year.
Yeah, and that having Molendyk be around was a big goal for them this camp. The Preds invited him down early, which they've done with some prospects in the past. And before the rest of the rookies came for rookie camp in early September, he was staying with the Nickel family at Scott Nickel's house, former Preds player who's the assistant GM. And they had a great time. Another prospect, Kalen Lind, tagged along with him. And they said it was the best home cooking they've ever had in their lives. But the other side effect of this was that Molendyk was part of the group of Preds players, which was like all the vets that got up on stage at the Dierks Bentley concert. So like he's going through all this stuff and like, it doesn't sound like that should matter, but it does.
It does.
You know,
For a young
you're
guy,
grooming a professional athlete. You're grooming an NHL player.
the more he experiences it, the more ready he'll be when he actually has to be an everyday player for you.
Right,
And
and-
if he can dip his toes in a little bit and then maybe heads back, he'll be much more ready next year if he is asked to be an everyday guy for the Preds.
Yeah, and that's actually the exact wording that Molendijk used in an interview, I guess 3 weeks ago now. Last year, he said in his first pro camp, he dipped his toe in. This year, he's jumping in, was what he said. So, yeah, that's how he's laid it out. And I mean, it's reasonable. There's a chance he's in the lineup on opening night this year. It could certainly happen.
And as Max said, Preds don't have to make another cut. They could. We will see. 7 days to go until the opener against Dallas, and still a little bit to sort out in terms of roster and lineup. So we'll see where Barry Trotz and Andrew Burnett go from there. We've got one more segment with Max. We're going to talk about these high expectations for the Preds. Can they live up to it? And, is this just a one-year window with some of these older guys, or do you think that there's a couple years that they can make a run for the cup here? We'll talk about that coming up next. And if you have any more questions for Max, please hit us on our text line or call 615-737-1025. Our phone lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. One more segment with Max Hers here on Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Jake Lyman in for Jared Stillman today. Jared will be back tomorrow afternoon from 2 to 6. We are wrapping up hour number 2. Spent the whole hour with Max Hers talking Preds. Getting ready for the new season. Starts a week from tonight. Excited for that one. Home opener against the Stars next Thursday.
Can I say one thing about that, Jake?
Yeah, go ahead.
9 of the first 12 Preds regular season games are home games.
Oh, wow.
9 of the first 12 are at home.
Lots of opportunities to go out and see this.
Some good teams, too.
As we've talked about, this video game fantasy lineup actually hit the ice for the first time. And I'm sure that there will be some great atmospheres and a chance for this team to start off hot, getting 75% of your first 12 games in front of a home crowd.
And a really cool thing about the games here is hockey fans will come from all over the continent and in some cases all over the world because Nashville is such a destination city, and they'll plan it around a home game. And I'll meet fans who are there an hour early who are wearing jerseys of a random team that is not playing. It's like, oh, you guys are obviously visiting. Like, talk to them. They watch the radio show, all that. And I just think that's the coolest thing ever. And the star power has been added to the Preds to draw even more people like that in this season.
Yeah, it's having a guy like Steven Stamkos. I mean, he's up there with Crosby and Ovechkin for the stars of the last 2 decades in the NHL. It's like when Aaron Rodgers came here 2 weeks ago. Like, people are going to come just to see Aaron Rodgers play football. People are going to come to see Steven Stamkos play hockey. So
I think Stamkos is a little bit more sane.
Yeah, I think that's a good bet. It's a good bet.
I'll leave it at that.
The dark does Steven Stamkos do the darkness retreats?
Well, we've all had one or two.
That's something we all have to do at some point in our life.
Whether we want to or not.
I guess so. Let's wrap up this hour here, Max. High expectations for this Preds team. Do you think they can live up to it? Like, do you think this is a team that can make a run for a Stanley Cup this year? And even though you did bring in some older guys, I feel like the window isn't just 1 year. I think it's not cup or bust. I think they've got probably the entirety of Stamkos' contract to go make a run at this thing.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right on that last point. And that's another thing that you can't know for sure until you see how everybody looks together. But the thing we felt last season watching the Preds, the time it took for the cohesion to build in the new style of play under Andrew Brunette, it took a while.
Yeah.
They didn't really get there until 3/4 of the way through the regular season when they had the 18-game point streak. And now this year, preseason practice, they're picking up where they were in the spring. Whereas last year in preseason, it was like the lowest building blocks on the rung being put in. Like, everything had to be installed. And I mean, that's how it works when you change coaches, and a coach like Andrew Brunette, who has such a unique system of playing offense and pressuring the puck and the high intensity and what he demands from guys and the conditioning part of it this year, even, like, guys look better. They look better conditioned because most of them went through it last year. So I think how quickly the new guys can get in with that will determine how high the Preds can finish in the regular season standings. I think as long as the production is there and everybody is where they should be, they will be hot by the end of the season, one way or another, I think is a fair expectation.
Yeah.
But as you're saying, the expectations are high, but players have been asked about it. Andrew Brunette's been asked about it. And I think the joint message to sum them all into one is these are championship caliber players who have dealt with this before.
And in hockey, I don't think you can ever say it's cup or bust because playoff hockey can be so random. It's like playoff baseball. Like, baseball and hockey are so different from basketball and football, where basketball and football, if you're the better team, odds are you're going to win the series or the game. Hockey and baseball is such a game of inches where one bounce not going your way can change the entire series. So I think you just have to put yourself in the position to make a run when you get to the playoffs. And, you hope that you get lucky along with continue to get hot at the right time. But like you said, they built the foundation last year. They were able to get Andrew Brunette's system in there, and you have a lot of returning pieces, but you bring in these veteran guys who've done it before, and it's a lot easier to introduce them into this foundation they've built than have to build from the ground up with them involved as well.
Yeah. No, I think you said it well. And I mean, if the Preds are cup or bust this year, which I agree with you, I don't think they are, then what are the Oilers this year? Like, the whole league can't be cup or bust. What are the Stars?
That's true. There are a lot of other teams that it feels like their window is closing. It feels like the Preds is opening this year.
Yeah, you would think so. So we'll see what it looks like. A lot will change. It's a long season, but I think the Preds have put themselves in a great spot. Biggest offseason in Preds history.
For sure.
I think without a doubt. And I don't know if you can say for sure that it is the most anticipated season in Preds history. I think 2017, 2018 may be ahead. So I'll leave the jury out to the listeners on that one, but
it's up there.
I think it's top 2.
Yeah.
I mean, take out the first season, like that's its own animal, but
yeah, coming off of going to the Stanley Cup, I could see that it was that one is up there as well. But yeah,
it's either that season or this season.
It's top 2 for sure. And we can't wait to get started again next week, Thursday, home game, Dallas Stars to open up the season. Max, thanks for spending some time with us.
Yeah,
here.
Thanks, Jake. My pleasure.
It's been a fun hour. And
thank you, Ian.
Oh, thank you, Max.
Oh, hi, Ian.
I know Ian. We'll get Ian more involved when TD gets on here. We'll talk some Titans.
Nah, Ian's a busy man. He's got stuff to do.
He's got a lot going on back there. And congratulations, Max, on your new role, getting to do a lot of the road games here this year. We can't wait to tune in.
Thank you. It's gonna be a blast. Thanks to everybody for listening.
Should be a fun season for the Preds. Again, we are a week away from opening night. Big thanks to Max Hurst for spending the last hour with us talking Preds. And previewing the upcoming season. When we come back, Teron Davenport is going to join us. We are going to spend the final 2 hours talking Titans. Usually, we're heading into the TD Power Hour with Jared and TD. You get 2 with Teron Davenport today, and we will get that started next. Jake Lyman in for Jared Stillman today. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3, The Game, hour number 3 on this Thursday. We're broadcasting live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Jake Lyman in for Jared Stillman today. Big thanks to Max Hers for stopping by for the last hour, talking all things Nashville Predators. Now it's time for an expanded TD Power Hour here on this Thursday as Teron Davenport joins us here on the program. TD, we got double trouble for the TD Power Hour today, 4 to 6, and we will hand the reins off to you, the listener, from 5 to 5:30. If you have questions for TD, get them in on our text line, 615-737-1025. You can call as well. Our phone lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. TD, how you doing?
Doing really well, man. Just recovering from this Mets loss last night, and looking forward to what happens tonight. It's game 3, wild card, and I need my Mets to win.
We will talk about that towards the end of the show because we got coverage of Mets and Brewers coming up at 6:00 right here on The Game. Winner moves on to face the Phillies in the NLDS. Should be a fun one. Mets won 8-4, I believe, on Tuesday, and then 5-3 Brewers win last night. So we'll get to some baseball at the end of the show. We'll see how TD's feeling leading into first pitch coming up just after 6 p.m. Central Time. But let's dive into the Titans.
Yeah,
got their first win of the season on Monday night. We've been talking on Jake and TD about needing to break through and finally get that first win. They did it. They got to 30 points for the first time in over 1,000 days. May not have been the prettiest way to get to 30 points, but they did it. They got the win, and they head into the bye week with a little bit of momentum.
Right, and that was the key thing. Getting that win and heading into the bye week with momentum is something that so many of the guys talked about. I remember Calvin Ridley early in the week saying that it could be a launching pad for them. So it was really critical to get this win, and then to get it in that fashion as far as having some type of rhythm and just establishing the run the way that they did was really good. The offensive line was fired up. Talking to those guys, Lloyd Cushenberry, J.C. Latham. And listen, I want to say something also about J.C. Latham. Go watch the end zone copy. I mean, this dude is so good blocking, run blocking, and he's solid in pass pro. I mean, they really, really hit. And I know a lot of people wanted Joe Alt, and Joe Alt he's going to have an outstanding career, but J.C. Latham is going to be good. And I tell you, he gives me those Trent Williams vibes. And coincidentally, as I have reported earlier in training camp, he went and spent a couple weeks with Trent Williams during the offseason. So, yeah, the similarities are there.
I've seen a couple of clips from that end zone view. He does maul people in the run game.
Yeah.
Like pass protection, it hasn't been bad. Like outside of the Bears game where he's had a little bit of first game struggles, maybe his welcome to the NFL moment.
Yep.
Since then, he's been solid in pass protection and elite in run blocking. It seems like he's been opening holes over there. Titans only threw the ball 3 times in the second half of that game on Monday night. If they can't stop the run, why stop running?
Why stop running? And you saw, go back and look at that run that Tony Pollard had where he got hulked. He was mad about that.
The 41-yard one.
Yeah, 41-yarder. And he doubled down with Skoronski and then got up to that next level. And the guy, the linebacker, tried to get past him. He just got a hand on him. And just a quick stiff arm to move him out the way. And Pollard was able to squirt through. And great job by Dylan Radins too, man, coming and sealing that too. I mean, that was poetry in motion. We watched that play.
The offensive line looked solid on Monday night. Like, yes, they weren't asked to do all that much in terms of actual pass protection. I mean, Mason Rudolph, he dropped back and threw it a good amount in the second quarter, but not much at all in that fourth quarter. But good to see the offensive line starting to come together a little bit. Nicholas Petit-Frere, I wouldn't say he was phenomenal on Monday night, but
his name wasn't called.
It was better than the last 2 games, which it was hard to be worse. I said Nicholas Petit-Frere on the program, aka
PT.
There we go. I can't break the tradition here on Stillman and Company. The big question coming out of Monday night is obviously the quarterback situation.
Yeah.
Will Levis reaching for a first down, didn't get it. even though he did, if they had challenged it,
My goodness.
but hurt his shoulder,
Yeah.
did not come back in. I believe I saw Paul Kaharski
Yeah.
report today that AC sprain, probably wouldn't play if they had a game this week, but should be okay for next week.
Yeah.
But it did draw the questions. Now that we've seen Mason Rudolph into a game, people thought there might be a quarterback controversy. Brian Callahan has promptly shut that down.
Yeah, he really did. He shut it down, and he should have shut it down because, yes, I get Rudolph. Things look solid with him, but this is still an evaluation process along with an attempt to win. And they're going to get as good of a look at Will Levis as possible. And they still believe, if healthy, he gives them the best chance to win. And that's really that. I will say this, though. If you look at that play, the one where he had the injury, he didn't have to run.
No.
Right.
And I saw your clip about this on Twitter.
Yeah. Chig Okonkwo was coming open, and it's one of those things where I know the pressure is coming to your blind side. He felt it. Good job feeling it. And, that's a positive because we talk so much about the lack of pocket presence and awareness. He felt it, but he just flushed out the pocket too quickly because if he'd have just stood strong and delivered a quick 5-yard throw, that's first down. The chains are moving. He never gets hurt, and we're not having this conversation about, hey, man, Mason Rudolph, maybe, you know what I mean? So that is something that you have to look at, just the ability for him to process and see things, just get comfortable in the offense. That's the important part, because once he does, then he can distribute it that way.
That is true. And if you haven't seen that, check it out on Tehran's Twitter. You do a good job of kind of circling where Will Levis's eyes should be. But you're right. He takes the snap. He does feel the pressure off his blind side, but he immediately kind of drops his eyes and looks to run instead of looking right over the middle of the field. Chig was right at the sticks.
Right there.
Would have been an easy first down.
Yeah.
Still should have been a first down.
Right. He got it. But shouldn't have been injured.
I didn't understand. Yes, Brian Callahan probably should have challenged it, but how did the referee miss it? Like, he dove at the sticks. It's not there. There was a clear, it's not like it was in the middle of the field where you're kind of judging based on where the yard marker is. He dove right past the marker.
Yeah. And the ball clearly passed over. I'm really confused by this. My fault for saying, I'm looking for the remote because MLB Network is killing me showing this over and over again. But yeah, he definitely had the first down. And it's crazy that I think it's crazy that I would have challenged it, but it turns out, and if you go back and watch the TV copy, as he's coming to the sideline, he's saying, I think I hurt my shoulder. Like, he's saying it.
And obviously it didn't end up mattering in the end. The Titans win that game by a decisive margin. But also you have to wonder if maybe Brian Callahan, because he didn't know if Will Levis, how hurt Will Levis was, if he's coming off the sideline, like, maybe your priority goes to that and like, hey, let's make sure our guy's okay.
Yeah.
And it's tough in the moment to focus on that. And, did they get that spot right? Maybe I should challenge it. And that's something that a young head coach has to sort through, something that he's never been a part of before. Right. So we will talk more about the quarterback situation coming up in the next segment. Brian Callahan has said that if healthy, Will Levis is the starting quarterback, but there have been calls. Mason Rudolph, he was able to manage the game. Should he end up getting more opportunities if they believe that's the best chance for them to win? We'll talk about the quarterback situation coming up next. Jake Lyman and Tehran Davenport in for Jared Stillman today, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
I think you're always talking in the second half, especially when it's a 2-touchdown game. Hey, listen, let's protect the ball. We're not going to put you in a lot of drop back situations there's no reason to when you got a 2-score lead and you run the ball and you're chugging the clock. So absolutely, I invite those kind of communications.
That was Mason Rudolph after the game on Monday night, talking about the game plan that didn't really involve him throwing the ball all that often late in the game. Titans ground and pound, handed off to Tony Pollard, Tajay Spears, and it led them to their first win of the season. Jake Lyman in for Jared Stillman today, joined by Teron Davenport until the end of the show at 6 p.m. And again, coming up at 5, we want to hear from you. Text or call 615-737-1025. Our phone lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Any questions you have for TD about the Titans, NFL, college football, whatever, send them our way. And again, that comes up at the top of the hour at 5. TD talking more about this quarterback situation. And I know there are people out there who are going to say, well, Mason Rudolph got the win. Will Levis didn't in his first 3. But I think if you put Will Levis in that game plan that Mason Rudolph had, he would have won the game too. Like they did not give Mason Rudolph the opportunity to make any mistakes.
Yeah.
He didn't make any mistakes, but it's not like he was slinging the ball around the yard in the second half. They pretty much just had him take the snap, turn around, hand it off to whoever's behind you. Sometimes they'll even let Tajay Spears take the direct snap. And that ended up being enough to win the football game.
Yeah, that really is what it boiled down to, minimizing opportunities to make mistakes. But as a veteran, Mason Rudolph is just going to be less inclined. I'm not always going to say that because there's some veterans where you're just like, man, dog, like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Carson Wentz, for one, But I think this particular veteran, he's going to know what to do with the football and understand that, Tina Turner's song rings true. We don't need another hero. You already have enough, and guys have done what they needed to do in order to help this team win. So, yeah, you do have that. And a good example, if you look, we mentioned the 3rd and 4 that Levis had. Brian Baldinger had broke it down on Baldy's breakdowns. And a few series later, it was the same daggone situation. And Mason Rudolph just smoothly delivered the ball right to Josh Wiley. It's a 5-yard gain. The chains are moving, and they eventually got a field goal.
And Will Levis, obviously, people are pretty much the only play you're going to remember outside of the play he got injured on was the interception. And the screen grab of Will Levis mouthing, I didn't see him at all.
Yeah.
Has kind of made the rounds, which isn't good. But it happens to young quarterbacks.
Absolutely. It happens. And it's funny. You look at this, right? Denard Wilson did the same thing to the Jets in week 2. I'm going to get back to that. But here's what happened, right? You got that front side, and Brian Callahan explained it, right? You had the front side pressure. Jalen Ramsey came. You got Jalen Phillips, too. Jalen Phillips is their best pass rusher. He's coming in your face. Ramsey is, too. Okay. And we broke this down on Whiteboard Wednesday. Hey, get the ball out, right? And they know that he's going to see that, right? And you have the linebacker coming down on that, driving down on the crosser. And it's just natural to look like they know that backside, Hopkins people watch film, right? And that's a route that they have connected on. And so they know that hitch is there. And it's just basically like flat curl. In college, we used to call it 5 semi, right? And it's just, okay, where 21, in this case, the 21, where the corner goes, you throw opposite. The corner jumped the flat, right? His job is to throw the hitch or the curl. And in that case, all 11, like you say, okay, this is huge, man. How do you miss it? Well, it's easy to miss them because you're focusing on that one thing, right? You see that pressure and you're just instantly boom, 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 coming back. Okay. And you're seeing what 21 does and whatever he does, like that's your read. It just so happened that Manny Agba, a defensive end / linebacker, dropped back into the passing lane and he wasn't expecting it. Now, week 2, Denard Wilson did the same thing. He tried to bait Rod. He actually had a double bait on both sides because they had 2 deep shifting down to 1 with Hooker buzzing down to take that quick route on the right.
Yep.
And then you had Jalen Harrell dropping back to take the quick route on the left. And you saw Rodgers look, and I wish like I could like zero in on the face mask, because I'm sure he was like, "You mother effer, you ain't got me," right? Because he tucked it, and then Landry went and sacked him. But the difference is you have a sack as opposed to an interception. You're living to see another play in the series,
and that's what you have to deal with sometimes as a young quarterback, is things you haven't seen like that, where yes, he's taught that he's reading that one defender. It's if he goes to the flat, you're throwing to DeAndre Hopkins, and the Dolphins had a good scheme for that exact play. Like they had it schemed up where they got Emmanuel Ogbah into the passing lane. It's another one similar to the pick six last week against the Packers. It wasn't quite as, oh my goodness, how could you have done that, as those first 2 weeks.
Right.
Like he's not making the plays out of the system of the offense where he's just trying to do too much anymore. It's now become he's making bad decisions, making the wrong reads, which not good, but at least he's not trying to play hero ball as much anymore. And as one of our texters on the text line says, Levis makes opportunities for mistakes. He hasn't done that the last 2 weeks, at least, even though he has made the mistakes.
Yeah, he's made the mistakes. And, what ended up happening is a couple instances where he actually went to the right place. He saw the right thing, but he didn't do the right thing.
Right.
Right. Like you saw the corner go with the flat. So your eyes took you to the right place, but next level quarterbacking is, oh, wait a minute. They think they're slick dropping him back. You got to catch that.
Yep.
Right. You saw Jair Alexander playing 8 yards off of DeAndre Hopkins. So okay, my quick 5-yard route, it should work. But next level quarterbacking is knowing, you know what? 23 has his butt pointed to the sideline. I don't have any deep route going that way. They're in cover 3. It's going to change the man. He's going to drive down and pick that thing off. And, oh, by the way, 23 is one of the best corners in the league. Yeah, you got to know not to throw it there. That's next level quarterback. And then he'll for the I almost said 49ers. For the Titans' sake, he'll eventually get there. But we'll see. I don't know for sure.
And it's just making those split-second reads, because, again, he made all the right reads pre-snap in that play. He made the right read based on the guy he was supposed to read, but it was that next level, like you're saying, that he has to still be able to see that and not make that throw that ends up in an interception. I know there are a lot of people out there who are going to say Mason Rudolph gives you the best chance to win. And maybe in some games, yes. Like a game like Monday night where the other team has a backup quarterback who, to be fair, he couldn't have hit water if he fell off a boat.
Man, listen.
That it was bad.
L'Jarius Sneed was burnt chicken on like 3 different plays. But like he said, did he catch it? Nope. So
in that type of game where your defense has pretty much shut down the opposing offense, the quarterback hasn't proven that he can do anything. Like you said, L'Jarius Sneed got beat by Tyreek Hill at least twice. And if Tua Tagovailoa is the quarterback, good chance that those are both touchdowns. It didn't happen on Monday night because Tyler Huntley was quarterbacking that team. But could Mason Rudolph, playing the way that he did, win the game in 2 weeks on the road against the Bills?
No.
Or in 3 weeks on the road against the Lions? No, you can't play that way. You have to have a quarterback who can make plays and push the ball down the field. I don't think Mason Rudolph is going to be that guy for the Titans.
Here's the thing about Mason Rudolph, and it's so crazy about pushing the ball down the field, because I don't know if you remember watching him at Oklahoma State.
That's all he did.
But right. He and James Washington, they were, man, like, and I told him about that. I was like, man, I used to love watching you and James Washington. He started cracking up. But yeah, man, it's like you're not going to win unless the game is perfect, right? With the way the style of play that Mason Rudolph is giving you now. You're not the game. You have to execute everything perfectly. And we know this Titans team, because special teams, they almost had another one blocked, by the way. Like,
went through his hands.
Yeah. So there's a lot that has to happen in order to win that way.
Quickly on special teams, because we might get to it in Ask TD if anybody wants to talk about that more. Again, you can text or call 615-737-1025. But the kickoff at the end, Colt Anderson's reaction was hilarious.
I didn't see it.
You didn't see it? No. You need to go find the TV copy. I can try and pull it up during the break here. He
Gronk spiked his headset.
Yes,
did he really?
I texted.
Does he know?
Nick
You
Frazier
know?
and Connor Newt, I was like, that's a dude who knows he just got fired.
Yeah,
because-
you got to be a
like,
Davidson County somewhere down there.
when Jaquan Jackson started
Unemployment,
waving off, I was like, what are you doing? Because I didn't know the new rules. Like, I
Yeah.
thought, it's a free kick. That's a live ball beyond
Yeah.
10 yards. And Jaquan Jackson, he might say he knew the rule. I'm not sure he did.
You-
Uh,
To Jaquan's credit, I bet you he did know the rule because they did come here and explain it. And
I hope
would,
so.
Yeah,
I hope he did know the rule, because if he did, then that's really smart. Like, he saw that was going to land beyond the 40. It only landed 2 yards beyond the landing zone. So it was closer than you'd like it to be.
Yeah.
But watching Colt Anderson's reaction to that, like, it literally looked like a guy who knew, man, I might've just lost my job over that. It worked out well. They ended up getting the ball at the 10-yard line, but man, that was, it was funny. I'll see if I could pull that up in the break. 615-737-1025 is our phone number if you want to text or call any questions for TD. We'll get to those coming up at 5 o'clock. Going to talk about some of the young guys who showed out on Monday night in Miami, including, yes, the big man, Tavondre Sweat. Meatloaf had a big night down in Miami. We'll talk about that coming up next here on Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
There was no Jeff Simmons last night to draw double teams. How impressive did that make what Tavondre was able to do for you?
Yeah, he's playing better and better every week. Really impressive performance by him. Dominant performance. That was a matchup on their interior line versus our interior line that we felt like was to our advantage, even with Jeff out. And really, those guys stepped up around him too. I thought Sebastian Joseph Day probably had his best day, most impactful day he's had. He's been a good, solid player for us, but he made some impact plays. And then Lynch and Anderson both played well as well. I mean, they did a nice job in their roles. So, but Sweat was a force. And when you got a guy like that can get pressure on the quarterback at his size, that can stop the run and make plays laterally along the line of scrimmage, he was really disruptive in that game and showed up in a matchup we felt really good about.
Brian Callahan after the game on Monday talking about Tavondre Sweat, the big game that he had with no Jeff Simmons next to him, and still ended up with, I believe, 6 tackles, 2 tackles for loss. He was all over the field. Big game for the rookie out of Texas. Jake Lyman in for Jared Stillman today, joined by Teron Davenport here until the end of the show here on 102.5 and 106.3 The Game. TD, man, Tavondre was really good. And, for Jared, because he's not here today, I've got to say, Tavondre Sweat versus Aaron Brewer was certainly a matchup that the big boy Meatloaf was able to win.
Yeah, man. Denard Wilson dialed up and he called the restaurant. He said, I wanted extra help with the meatloaf. And that's what the Dolphins ended up getting, man. And the thing really that stood out to me, because looking at the game, and we talked about it a little bit, just how this team is so fast horizontally, right? They attack those edges with so much speed. They're 3 deep doing it. Well, Mostert didn't play, but Devin Achane and then Jalen Wright. Yeah. Obviously, everybody knows about him and the jetpack he has in his shoulder pads. So you look at that, and it was like, oh, it's going to be a little trouble. But this dude was able to get in there and do such a great job, even moving horizontally and kind of cut off the runners before they could get where they had to go. Like the one where he and Kenneth Murray tackled Achane in the backfield. And then you look at when he got Jalen Wright, he was going to his right, Wright was going to the left, and he got him in the backfield. It was one where he grabbed him and threw him down, and he just did the little shimmy, you know what I mean? You watch the sideline, they went crazy. And those are the types of things that you really have to look at, in addition to obviously the play being made, how it impacts the rest of the team.
He was fantastic on Monday night. And you mentioned Titans limiting that lateral speed. That 4th down stop with Kenneth Murray and Quandre Diggs comes to mind as well. I mean, they strung that out, and Diggs laid a hammer. Was that Achane who was heading out there?
No. It was Tyreek Hill.
It was Tyreek Hill, yeah.
Jet sweep with Tyreek Hill. And shout out Kenneth Murray Jr., right? Being able to make him string it out. And Brownlee initially made him bow it out just a little bit. He's back at the crib, and you could tell that he was hyped to be back at the crib because that young boy was balling. So you have that. And then, like you said, man, Diggs coming and cleaning up. Like this team, all of a sudden, is fast on defense. And it's just crazy to think about that because you go to last year, Tua was able to get the edge. Remember Jack Gibbons, he outran him for that 1st down. That's not happening this year, at least, in that particular game. There's going to be times. I mean, just ask Malik Willis.
And I talked with Nick Frazier in the first hour about these newcomers and maybe a lot of question marks around a lot of them. I mean, Tavondre Sweat and L'Jarius Sneed obviously had injury and some off-the-field concerns. Kenneth Murray was kind of an underwhelming signing on the first day of free agency. I don't remember a lot of Titans fans who were all that excited about him. Yeah. Him and Ernest Jones, I mean, they are so fast out there. It just feels like at least 3 or 4 times a game, they're shooting the gap and they're blowing a play up before it even can get started.
You see how much of a difference fast, lateral, sideline to sideline players can make your defense look. You just mentioned those 2 players, and you're 100% right. Now, it's funny because I remember Kenneth Murray Jr., and people were like, PFF rating. Look, PFF doesn't account for using a fork as a spoon. You see what I'm saying? Like, he was misused with the Chargers. I almost said San Diego. He was misused with the Chargers. And if you're not used correctly and asked to do things that aren't of your strength, naturally you're not going to play well. Now he's being asked, and he's playing well with the exception of the Packers game.
go turn on the Oklahoma film, and
my goodness.
and you'll see why Kenneth Murray was a guy the Titans felt like they wanted to bring in.
Yeah.
And
it was the same mindset.
He has been one of the best players on this Titans defense so far this season, and it's been cool to watch along with some of those rookies. You mentioned Jarvis Brownlee Jr. had a really good game as well. Our phone lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. 615-737-1025 is the way to find us. We were talking about another rookie, Jaquan Jackson, before the break, and the kickoff rule that he didn't catch it. Almost ended up being a Miami Dolphins onside kick, I guess, even though it was safe off a safety. But
Free
it worked
kick,
out.
yeah.
Larry is on our phone lines wanting to talk about the kickoff rule. Larry, go ahead.
I was hoping you guys could explain it to me. I thought it was kind of funny that the TV announcers really didn't cover it. It was almost like they were scared to. So I'm sitting here. I still don't know what.
Yeah, thank you for the call, Larry.
Go ahead.
I had the TV on mute during that, so I just was seeing Cleet Blakeman do kind of a dissertation on whatever the call was, but I had it muted. Basically, what I think the rule is that when you declare that onside kick, it has to land within 20 yards, 25 yards,
Right.
of where
That's the strike zone.
Yes, it has to land within that, or else it's an illegal kick and it's a penalty. So it was half the distance to the goal from where it was kicked, which was the 20-yard line. Very strange watching it on mute, and I'm sure Larry, even hearing what they were saying, I'm sure it was confusing. But I guess that is how the new kickoff rule works, that even if it's an onside kick, it still has to land in that landing zone.
Yes, it still has to land in that landing or strike zone. And if it doesn't, then it's declared dead. And that's why you saw Jackson just kind of tell them to, it's done. The play's over. And they came and explained that, to us. The thing that's interesting, and I don't know for sure, but I heard someone say that that's not necessarily in the rule book that's online. So I don't know, but I do remember specifically because I asked about the onside kick because I thought it was just crazy that you cannot do an onside kick until the fourth quarter, and when you do it, you have to declare like you put in a tackle eligible. It has to be done that way, So yeah, it's another rule that it's confusing, but I mean we saw what happened with it in this particular day.
Yeah, Larry, we're all kind of learning as we go along here, because I think everybody had the same reaction having watched football for however long, that on a free kick, if a ball lands beyond 10 yards, that ball's live and you have to recover it. So watching the Dolphins get it, I had the same reaction as Colt Anderson. Like, what are you doing? Why would you not catch that? Maybe Jaquan Jackson is just smarter than all of us. Adam in Portland is next on our phone lines, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Adam, what you got?
Yeah, man. So I kind of am just perplexed with everybody's reaction and how they're acting towards this Will Levis, Mason Rudolph thing. I don't think it's fun. I don't think it's funny. I think it's goofy that we're even having the conversation about Will Levis still being quarterback. It's kind of like if you've ever dated a girl and the first month is awesome, and then you see the first red flag and you're like, oh God, okay, I see why she's dating me. You know what I'm saying? Like at that point you're like, I got it. I figured it out. That's what it is with Will Levis. That's why he fell up the second. That's why nobody wanted to date him. You know what I'm saying? So he throws picks. He threw a pick in that game, dude. Like Mason Rudolph, you could call him a game manager. That's what we need, is somebody to manage the game, dude. Like we got a good enough defense. So I don't understand why we got to go to Levis, because he's got a promising arm. He's got a slow windup. Like it's like he's winding up an old stopwatch, man. Like he's slow, and Rudolph has a quick release. We got a sucky line. It just makes sense to me.
What if I told you talk about the slow windup? What if I told you that his release is much better than the league average and top 10 quickest? Oh, he dropped.
Yeah, I mean,
I think what do you want to win, right? I think do you want to be competitive and go 8 and 9,
7 and 10,
7 and 10? Do you want to do that? That's what I could almost assure you. At a minimum, Mason Rudolph is going to get you. It's not likely he's going to get you more. And this is not me, picking at Mason Rudolph. I have stood firm when Jarrett went crazy about the sign, I said, hey, calm down. This dude is a good backup quarterback now, right? But you're not likely to do much better than that. And then that puts so much stress on everyone else. And granted, these mistakes that Levis is having more than put stress on everyone else too. But I just think what they're doing is looking at upside and potential, right? And there's just a lot of potential with Will Levis, and it's a learning game, that a pro curve that he has to be able to pick up. And there's different mistakes, right? You see him, okay, there was a sliding issue. Okay, he was able to adjust that, and as John Glennon called it, a slumble, right? Slide and tumble combined into
Just
one.
kind of fall.
Yeah, and then he got that together. Then you had the turnovers, the bad ones, and you didn't have that, but then you had the interception, and it's a process, man. And I mean, I understand what they're doing, and they're giving it a chance to work, because they really want to see fully what's going on before they move on to the next one.
And I get why Adam and fans who have that same sentiment feel that way, that, hey, if Mason Rudolph starts all 4 of these games, you might be 3-1, maybe, probably at least 2 wins.
It's likely.
And I get what you're saying. You play the game to win football games, but you look at the long-term future of this franchise. Mason Rudolph, yeah, he's not going to lose you games, but he's not going to win you a lot of games either.
Right.
You probably end up in that 6 to 8 wins. You're picking anywhere between 7th and 12th, probably at the end of the year. Will Levis, yes, he's going to make some mistakes, but he's got the higher upside where, yeah, he might lose you a couple games here and there, but maybe he figures it out towards the end of the year and starts winning you some games and elevating the people around him.
That's what you're looking at.
And the point of this year, like, people can say that they thought the Titans might be Super Bowl contenders this year. I think they'd be lying to themselves. Like, the Titans I don't know if there's anybody who honestly believed the Titans were going to win the Super Bowl this year. The point of this year is to figure out if you have a franchise quarterback. Like, that is more than anything. That is the point of this year, is to figure out whether you have a franchise quarterback in Will Levis, and can you find one if he's not the guy. Yep. So I would much rather go 3-14 with Will Levis than 7-10 with Mason Rudolph. You don't make the playoffs either way. And you put yourself in a position where you know where you're going moving forward.
Exactly.
We will continue talking about this on the other side. And again, continue to get your questions in for TD. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. We'd love to hear from you on our phone or text lines, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Tune in to 94.9 The Fan this Saturday for Vanderbilt football. The Commodores taking on number 1 Alabama, with pregame beginning at 1:30, kickoff at 3:15. Coverage is also available on the 94.9 The Fan app and at thegamenashville.com. Jake Lyman in for Jared Stillman today with Teron Davenport here on Stillman & Company, 102.5-106.3 The Game. Jake and TD here on Stillman and Company on this Thursday evening, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Jake Lyman, Teron Davenport in for Jared today. Jared will be back tomorrow to wrap up the week. Talking Titans here. And again, get your questions in for TD, 615-737-1025. We'd love to hear from you. We'll get to those coming up at the top of the 5 o'clock hour. TD, we were just watching the L'Jarius Sneed mic'd up from Monday night during the break.
Yeah.
He is hilarious. Like,
Yeah.
so funny. Like, just talking as much trash as he possibly could to Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill on the field. And then they pan to him on the bench singing some Zach Brown band. Like,
Yeah.
dude he's a character.
Yeah, he's a character, and he's someone that it's been pretty cool just seeing him just start to open up. Because initially it was like you ask him a question and you don't really get an answer like that. Now he's opening up, and you see him settling in. And look, he's not healthy. You could tell, right? But he still did a solid job for the most part against one of the best receivers in the league. So you could see just why they brought him in. And just the way he changes the defense, you know.
He's a part of this offseason where they brought in some established guys to build up the defense, brought in Calvin Ridley on the offensive side, Lloyd Cushenberry. This is a roster that is built to win in the near future.
Mm-hmm.
They need the quarterback. And we've been talking about, whether it makes sense to go to Mason Rudolph over Will Levis. Brian Callahan has said if he's healthy, Will Levis is our starter heading into week 6 against Indianapolis. Let me pose a scenario here to you, TD. Let's say Will Levis isn't the guy at the end of the year. You end up picking, let's say, 6th. Probably not going to get an elite quarterback there. I don't even know if there is an elite quarterback prospect in this draft. Like,
there are. Absolutely.
Well, let me. Who
Cam Ward is a player.
See, I being a Virginia Tech fan, that game hurt on Friday night.
Yeah.
But
sorry to bring it up,
but I texted some of my Virginia Tech friends watching that game. I said, man, Cam Ward looks legit. Some of the ball placement he had on those throws, like, you could not have ran out and dropped it there any better.
Yeah. And then the ad-libbing, right? The freelancing and getting it to the tight end, on that final drive, the scoring drive, and then the 4th and 3, the adjustment, getting it to Restrepo. I think that's how you probably. But yeah, I mean, so Cam Ward's a player. That's Quandre Diggs' cousin, also, by the way.
I know. I saw they had the same tweet.
Yeah.
Playing in the same stadium this week.
Yep. So you got that. I think I think Jalen Milroe is a really good quarterback.
He did look really good.
He
on
showed
Saturday.
that he could throw that deep in breaking route. We're not going to turn this whole segment into a draft thing, but I mean, even Shedeur Sanders is talented, right? And it's just, okay, can you balance out, the extra stuff? And I would be willing to, take it on.
And if Rand Carthon and Brian Callahan love a quarterback prospect in this draft, then this whole conversation doesn't matter. If they have a guy that they love and they can get him, then this doesn't matter. But let's say they don't have a guy that they love. How would you feel about this scenario? Trade back, pick up a first-round pick for next year when you've got guys like Nico Iamaleava coming out, Arch Manning, and then sign just a veteran bridge guy for next year. Because you could be competitive. Sam Darnold probably is going to cost more than a veteran bridge guy the way he's playing right now. But if you could get a guy who's serviceable, Andy Dalton type guy, they could be competitive with this roster while still having 2 first-round picks to use as ammo to move up for your quarterback of the future the next year.
Yeah, I mean, it would be hard to sell that to your L'Jarius Sneeds, to your Jeffrey Simmons and those types. But, I mean, I could see that being something that would be on the table. Just wonder who would be a quarterback to sign that would be able to still, like, get you in place,
Right.
So yeah,
this isn't like I'm not saying signing a backup quarterback, but a guy who could be a Ryan Tannehill type guy. Obviously, you're not going to bring Ryan Tannehill back, and this is just a hypothetical because I know there's been a lot of talk about this draft class not being as talented at the quarterback position as maybe the previous couple have been. We don't know. Like, there have been quote unquote bad quarterback classes that have ended up having star guys come out of it. And there's been quote unquote like generational quarterback classes that have been duds. Yeah. So you never know until the guys actually hit the field what they're actually going to be. But just my thought when
Jameis Winston.
Yeah, Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota, people were talking about them as, surefire guys coming out, and neither of them got a second contract with the team that drafted them. And, Trevor Lawrence, the Jaguars are the only 0-4 team in the league right now, and they just paid their generational number 1 overall pick $250 million.
Yeah. Doug Peterson throwing players under the bus. It's just Jacksonville's a mess again.
Yeah.
Again.
And that's, you don't want to end up being like Jacksonville, which is why it's so important to figure out what Will Levis is this year. Because you don't want to end up in a limbo where you feel like, well, could we get anything better? Which right now, I think if the season ended today, I think they'd be out on Will Levis. But there's a reason the season isn't 4 games long. It's 17 games long. And he's got a long way to go to prove that he's the guy, but he'll have his opportunities as long as he continues to improve. I'm just saying, if you don't like the quarterbacks in this draft, and again, that's an organizational thing. Like Mel Kiper may say he doesn't like the quarterbacks in this draft, but if Rand Carthon and Brian Callahan say, hey, Cam Ward can run this offense to perfection, and we think he's the guy, I'm all for it. But if you don't like it, I think there could be a way to build up your draft capital and use it as ammo to move up for a guy in the future. And, the names of Nico Iamaleava and Arch Manning obviously have a lot of ties to the state of Tennessee, and like the new stadium. It's going to put butts in seats.
That would definitely put butts in seats, without a doubt.
Just a hypothetical there as we continue through this bye week and wait to see if Will Levis is healthy enough to go in 10 days when the Titans take on the Colts at Nissan Stadium, and whether he can continue to build himself up, get his confidence back up, and start to have some success in year 2 for the Titans. We will take a quick break here to wrap up hour number 3. When we come back, we're going to hear from you. We already got people on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, with questions for TD. We'd love to hear from you as well. You can text or call. 615-737-1025 is the phone number. That's coming up next here on Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Final hour on this Thursday, Stillman and company. Jake Lyman, Teron Davenport in for Jared Stillman today, broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Double the TD on this Thursday, usually just the power hour. We've got him for 2 hours today, and the next half hour is all for you. We'd love to hear from you. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Our phone line's driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. You can text or call with any questions you have for TD. We've already got plenty on the text line, but keep pouring them in. Again, until 5:30, we are taking your questions. TD, let's start with this one. We talked a little bit about T'Vondre Sweat earlier in the program and the big day that he had in Miami. We mentioned Aaron Brewer was on the other side of him a lot of the time. This texter says, TD, PFF had Miami's center as one of the worst centers last week. We take PFF with a grain of salt here. How much of the performance that Sweat had is about Sweat, and how much of it is about taking advantage of a guy who is much smaller and probably not as good as him?
Well, guess why he was rated one of the worst centers last week?
T'Vondre Sweat.
I mean, but it doesn't take, the formulas and algorithms and all that stuff to see that T'Vondre Sweat played a good game. So, all he could do was go against who he is in front of him. And it wasn't always the center, right? There were times where he was offset, in the shade, and he was facing the guards too. So it wasn't just the center he was going against. But either way, whoever is in front of him, they were having problems, and that's the bottom line.
Big game from T'Vondre Sweat. Similarly, another texter wants to know, with Sweat looking capable of anchoring the middle of the defensive line, he'd like to see Jeffrey Simmons move around and pick his matchups kind of like Chris Jones does with the Chiefs. What do you think of that, having Simmons kind of move around the line with big Meatloaf anchoring down the middle?
That would be good. Like, we've seen Simmons line up as a 3-tech as well as a 5-tech. So, they are moving them around, meaning the coaching staff. And I will say this, Denard Wilson did say that they're allowed to go ahead and call their own stunts when they see fit. So that's another way to kind of get those matchups. But the texter's right. Allow him to stand up and look. And, Sebastian Joseph Day, who is having a solid year, just work with him. Okay, you go ahead. It's your matchup. You do what you do, and I'm going to go dominate over here,
Me and Nick Frazier talked early in the program. Nick brought up the idea of, if things continue to go south for the Titans, if they're, let's say, 1-6, 2-6 heading into the trade deadline, the idea of fielding offers for Jeffrey Simmons, I think that's not a guy that you're willing to move on from. Yes, the package you'd get back in return would be great, but that's a dude who is probably the cornerstone of your franchise.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier about bringing in a bridge quarterback next year. How does that look to L'Jarius Sneed and Calvin Ridley, these guys you just brought in here?
That's what I'm saying.
Hey, we thought we were going to be running with this guy for the next 3 or 4 years, and you just traded him away 6 months into us being here. I don't think that looks too good to your locker room.
Yeah, no, 100%. It doesn't look good to the locker room. And I understand, right, the sacks aren't there, and obviously everybody wants that number to be increased, but he just has to get back to that guy that you saw, in 2022. You saw the start of 2023. That's what you paid for, and that's what you need to get.
And it may sound counterintuitive, but a lot of Jeffrey Simmons' best games have come against Quentin Nelson and the Colts. Like, it does feel like there's always a play in that game where you see Jeffrey Simmons gets the better of Quentin Nelson. Those are two heavyweight guys going at it in the trenches. Our phone lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. We're taking questions for TD to start off the 5 o'clock hour. Chuck is on our phone lines wanting to talk about Mason Rudolph. Chuck, go ahead.
Yes, let me give you a different opinion from a season ticket holder from the Vanderbilt days. I have missed 3 home games since they moved to Adelphia. Well, Tucson now. My seats are right up in the lower bowl, right above where the opposing team comes out of the chute. So they're not on the 50th inning. But I'm still paying $400 every time I go to one of these games. That's my season ticket cost, $400, 2 seats. So 7-8 times that. I don't understand why I, as a season ticket holder, am expected to wait until we make a decision on if this guy's okay or not before we start saying, let's just win some damn games. I've been through a lot of tough years, and I'm just telling you, it is time for somebody to do something to get us some more wins. Please. That's my point.
Thank you for the call, Chuck.
Chuck, before you leave, do you think you cannot win with Will Levis?
I gave him every opportunity in my mind when he was drafted. I thought he was a deal in the second round, but I was confused after the Chicago game. I became more confused. And let me just say this too. Do you know how, with this losing that's going on, and how difficult it is to sit in the stands, being surrounded by Jets fans, being surrounded by Green Bay fans, screaming in your ear because our team doesn't win enough to get loyal in the house customers. That's a point of frustration too. So I don't know if you can win with Levis either. And, I understand that, you got to give him a chance. Well, I thought we gave him a pretty good chance. And
Less than a season?
We got to give him a whole season. You know how much that cost me?
Hey, he wanted my man Chuck want to be like Carolina. Hey, Bryce Young, you know what? You got to go. But listen, man, I tell you what, I'm sure the Titans appreciate all the money that you put into watching those games, and I'm sure they appreciate the fact that you're not like a lot of these ticket holders who sell the ticket, because it is like that Packers. It was a disgrace.
And it
was a darn disgrace.
It's tough because
oh my God,
Nashville's such a destination city. People want to come here.
I totally understand that, and I tell all my friends that when they're like, "Why are there so many opposing, fans in the stands?" But if you had I don't know. I was going to say if you had a winning team, but Vrabel put on some winning teams, and I still had them damn other fans around me. So.
I mean, Chuck has a point, though. If you have a team that, I highly doubt, actually thinking back to 2019, down the stretch, it wasn't like that. Chuck is right. When they had that run, fans were like, hey, man, forget that. The experience outweighs the money that I could make, so I'm just going to go to the game. So, I mean, he does have a point.
And Chuck, thank you for the call. I agree with the point that, hey, you're paying all this money to go see this team win games. Yes, you want the long-term success. And there is a texter on our text line saying, elite quarterbacks aren't hanging on trees. And the goal of this franchise isn't win 8 games every year. And,
right.
Your fans maybe get to see 5 or 6 of those at home. That's great, but you're trying to win a championship. And to do that, you have to find an elite quarterback. But I get what Chuck's saying. It does stink. I went to the Jets game, and it's first off, it sucked to see them lose. And it sucks that, you're seeing a bunch of green around you in your home stadium. So it is tough. And thank you for the call, Chuck. Good points. But I think the team would rather ride it out with Levis than win maybe 2 or 3 more games with Mason Rudolph out there this year. We will continue to take questions from you for TD on the other side of the break. Again, you can text or call us 615-737-1025. Our phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. We've got a few waiting on the text line. And anyone else, please chime in. We still got one more segment of Ask TD. That's coming up next here on Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Greet the Mets.
Our two resident Met fans,
That's right.
Ian Safar, Teron Davenport,
That's
getting
right.
getting in the mood. We got 45 minutes
Yeah.
till first pitch.
Yeah, shout out to Ian, man. Got the Mets shirt on, man. You know,
I think it's probably the last day I get to wear it.
I mean, this station is you got 3 Mets fans,
right,
all in here within a couple hours at a time. Willie Donick ended the show with an LGM before they got off at 2:00. So we'll be rooting for the Mets. Even though the Brewers are the Sounds parent club as well. So there's Nashville. They're ties to both. Somebody's going to win and move on. We will not be rooting for the Phillies in the next round.
I think I'm going to go to that because I'll double up, go get to see my parents,
right,
and go to a game. So
fingers
crossed. It will start Monday, right?
Saturday. So
okay.
all 4 divisional series start Saturday, and then NL plays Sunday, AL plays Monday. So
it would be a Sunday game.
Yeah, Saturday, Sunday in Philly, and then I think it would be Tuesday, Wednesday in New York.
I might be fine in LaGuardia then. I don't know. I'm gonna figure it out.
Well, let's hope,
let the win first.
Let's hope
you know
the Mets
what I'm saying?
get the win tonight.
Don't put the cart before the horse.
You can listen to that game coming up right after us here on the game. 6:08 first pitch because they've got the weird first pitch times in the playoffs. My Tigers are in Cleveland this weekend. I've been like scouting flight prices to get out to a game, but I don't have that type of money. It's like $500 just for the flight, and then plus the tickets. I'm like, you know what? I will watch from my couch.
Yeah, no, I get it.
If I had family to go to, like if they were playing in DC or Baltimore, I would consider it. But doesn't make sense. We have Ask TD going on right now, so we want to hear from you. 615-737-1025. Still can get in some questions for Teron. We had a good call with Chuck in the first segment of this. Chuck, season ticket holder talking about how he just wants to see some wins. Like he doesn't care how it happens. Whoever's going to win the football games needs to be out there. We have some texters who have reacted to that on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, talking about some impatience of Titans fans. And that's kind of been the way the league has trended the last few years, TD. But a lot of them are saying, QBs used to get 2 or 3 years. And, even if they struggled, they'd still get the long leash.
Mm-hmm.
But we've seen Bryce Young already get benched, and people are calling for Will Levis to get benched. How long do you think the leash is for Will Levis? Like if, let's say against the Colts, he's healthy, he goes out and makes another boneheaded mistake. Do you think that's it, or do you think he still has some more after that?
I think he still has some more.
That's what I'm thinking.
They're gonna give him every chance to play himself out of that position. I firmly believe that. So I personally feel 2 years is usually like Bryce Young. I think with how bad it was in Carolina, he might not should have played at all right off the rip. You know what I mean? Maybe later in the year.
Especially for a guy of his stature. Like if you don't have people who can protect him, that's not usually it's going to end bad.
It's trouble. So I think you typically give 2 years. And I mean, Geno Smith is a great example, right? Like the dude bounced around. He's with the Jets, had the situation with the locker room and the fight. And then he was with the Giants.
Yeah.
And, then he landed with Seattle, or he was with the Chargers, I want to say, for a moment. And then he landed with Seattle. And, hey, guess what happens when the coach believes in you and the scheme matches you? You have success and comeback player of the
Look at Baker Mayfield. Same thing. He's playing tonight on Thursday Night Football.
I think Baker may be the best comparison because you look at Baker Mayfield, all the different offenses. This dude had 3 head coaches in 2 years, man.
Yeah.
Like, come on, man. I'm not saying Will Levis has it that bad, but you look at how many schemes Levis has had to learn and figure out. There's 4 different ones. And I know Liam Cohen's scheme was similar to this and that. I get it, but it's not the same, right? So I think having to learn those 4. Baker Mayfield is a great example. I'm glad you brought his name up.
We have a few texters kind of on this same vein. Is the scheme a fit for Will Levis? And do you think that Brian Callahan maybe needs to simplify some things?
Yeah.
Because like we were just watching Kurt Warner's breakdown of that interception on Monday night. Like made the right initial read, but couldn't react fast enough to the change that the Dolphins made. Do you think there's anything that they can do to make things easier on him?
No, not really. I mean, yes, play action. And this is something that I was talking about over the last couple of weeks, run that play action because it creates those big, easy windows for Levis to throw the ball to, get you in a rhythm and those types of things. So, and they've worked play action. I mean, what was it? I want to say from the Jets to the Packers game, they doubled the amount of play action they use. I think it was like 13% to 33%.
Yeah.
But I think it matches. I think the organization matches. I think everything matches for Levis. Is just the only thing that doesn't is the urgency and the need for that to happen now. I think that's the one difference.
And hopefully this bye week he can get healthy and we can start to see some of the growth. Let's hope we can get through one game without an interception. Like that would be nice. We've got a lot of people on our phone lines, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. We'll try and get to all of you here in the last few minutes of STD. Maybe we might have to extend this to another segment if we get enough people chiming in. Let's start with Will. He says, let go Bud Adams Jr. Talking about Amy, I assume. Will, what you got for us?
Yeah, Bud Adams Jr. is destroying this organization. It's in the cart before the horse syndrome. We've got this multi-billion-dollar stadium that we're worried about bringing income to Nashville by hosting Super Bowls. That's the problem.
You could host one and play one too.
It's happened twice.
Tampa. Win a Super Bowl. That's top priority, not a multi-billion-dollar stadium. You had that guy a couple of calls ago talking about the money he's spending to go sit surrounded by opponents. Man, wait till they open this new multi-billion-dollar stadium with ticket prices increased, and you've got that product. Man, she needs to get real. She needs to sell this team to somebody with the right business mind to take the Titans into the modern day of NFL football. It sucks. The product sucks.
Will, thank you for the call. I don't see Amy ever selling the team. No. You could maybe see her.
It's a family treasure.
She could step back and let somebody else be
let Kenneth take
the managing. Yeah, let Kenneth take over. But like they're never going to sell the team. Yeah. It's very rare to see somebody sell the team unless they are forced to sell the team. Like Dan Snyder in Washington was kind of forced out, or Donald Sterling with the Clippers. Like you have to have some sort of like scandal go on to force you to sell the team. Like NFL teams, there's a reason why people want to buy NFL teams for trillions of dollars or billions of dollars, because they make a lot of money.
And I think look, she has people in place that are in charge of being concerned about building a Super Bowl. That's why you got Chad Breaker, Rand Carthon, A-Rob, Anthony Robinson, et cetera. So
I agree that you can question Amy's decisions and maybe being a little bit too quick on the trigger with John Robinson and Mike Vrabel. I get you can question that, but like I think we're a far cry from Washington fans where you've got sell the team signs in the stadium.
If you peel back the curtain on the Vrabel thing, that you wouldn't question it, but it's okay. Next question.
Let's go to Thomas on our phone lines, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Wants to talk about the offensive line. Thomas, go ahead.
Fellas, how's it going?
What's up, Thomas?
Hey, TD, wanted to get your input on the progression you've seen from the offensive line this year. We knew the big question mark going into the year, how much of an impact could Bill Callahan have on the players, or the players just not good enough to be fixed? And what you've seen, weeks 1 through 4, and then going into the bye and then afterwards, what you think that progression will continue to look like for the rest of the year? Like, do you think NPF will be able to turn it around at some point later in the year? Or do you think that's just going to be constantly a weak point on the offensive line and then just the whole unit itself?
Yeah, I think, and appreciate you. I think Nicholas Petit-Ferrer is going to continue to be an area to monitor, right? It is what it is. The jury is out on him, so we'll see there. But as an offensive line, I didn't see it as much in the Dolphins game because the Dolphins didn't do it. But if you look at the Bears, they did it some. the Jets did some, but the Packers, oh my Lord, they stunted and ran twists in games and stuff like crazy. It was diabolical, and the offensive line struggled with that. So I think they've gotten a little bit better in that area. You look at our Dylan Radence, run blocking it continues to trend up. They just have to get the passing thing together. And I mean, look, man, the pass blocking, the sacks aren't always on them, right? I mean, there are times where, and we've discussed it, Levis has kind of drifted into sacks or didn't see the read that he was supposed to, held on to it, or scramble like the fourth down against the Packers. He should have thrown the ball to Tony Pollard. He ended up scrambling. It was tackled behind the line of scrimmage. That's a sack. So there's a lot that goes into it. I think collectively this offensive line isn't trash, but there's a lot of area for improvement. But that center to left tackle area, I think is coming along. Skoronski, he has to get better though.
And with PT, Nicholas Petit-Frere over on the right side, you thought maybe there was the competition with Jalen Duncan, but then Jalen Duncan is a healthy scratch on Monday, which I was laughing at when I saw that come out. I'm like, they talk about, man, it'll be decision who starts, and it's like, oh, well, Jalen Duncan is inactive. So maybe John Ojukwu is the next man up at that position if Nicholas Petit-Frere continues to struggle.
Yeah.
It's not good no matter how you slice it. They're going to have to address right tackle in the offseason, and Jared Stillman will keep telling the right tackle story until they do. But that's definitely going to be one of their top priorities when we hit the offseason this year. We will take another break, and we'll come back. We will continue to take your questions for TD for one more segment. Why not? We've still got some people on the phone lines. We've still got some texts rolling in on the text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. So we will get to all of those coming up next, the third segment of Ask TD here on Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Jake Lyman, Teron Davenport in for Jared today. He will be back tomorrow to wrap up the week. Excited for that. Also, make sure to keep it tuned right here. Mets and Brewers coming up, top of the hour. Decisive Game 3 in the NL Wild Card Series. Winner moves on to face the Phillies. We'll talk some baseball in our final segment, but we have extended our Ask TD to a third segment here because we've got plenty of people on the text and phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com who want to chime in. Let's head to the phone lines now. Kenston has been waiting patiently to talk some Titans. Kenston, what you got?
What's going on, fellas? How y'all doing?
Doing good.
What's up, man?
What's up, TD? Question, man, specifically for TD. I was listening to Kanye, man. I think it was Can't Tell Me None, and he had a phrase in there that made me think of Will Levis. It said, when you try hard, that's when you die hard. And I immediately thought of Levis, man, and how Jared, had the thing before. He always says he's so tightly wound. And it's like, man, he's got sometimes why people say quarterbacks bust is because they got the weight of the franchise on them. And I think he's feeling that, and he's pressing and trying to be too perfect. And it just makes me think like a situation, man, like you have with a girl sometimes, like the one that you're trying to be perfect for, you're trying to do everything right, and she still won't give you the time of day, but the one that you're just kind of letting it hang loose and just don't care how it goes, that's the one that ends up falling for you. So it's like, I think Levis, man, hopefully with this bye, he can take a breath, he can chill, take a chill pill, and just kind of go out there with the weight off his shoulders and just let it fling, man. I think if we sit there with Levis, I think he'll be okay. Just wanted to hear what you thought about that, if he really needs to kind of take a chill pill and chill out.
Kenston over there sounding like a yams whisperer right there, man.
I love it.
I laughed at myself at that one. People out there will get that, some won't, but it's all good. I think when you look at Will Levis, that's the big problem, trying too hard. And that's why I asked Brian Callahan, I said, listen, you guys broke the 30-point streak. You got your first win without him on the football field. How much do you think you're going to have to work to keep him from pressing to do so much out of concern for his job? And I think that's a part of why you see such this concerted effort to make sure that he knows without controversy, without doubt, that he is the quarterback, because they are well aware of that hero syndrome that he has. I saw it in 2016 and 17 with Carson Wentz. And then I saw it from afar in 2018 where he was just trying so hard. I mean, I get it. You got a Super Bowl MVP from the previous year behind you. Levis doesn't have that much pressure, but I saw how that could break a quarterback down. And if you don't find a way to balance that thing out, yeah, it could get the best of you.
Will Levis is already so tightly wound, and just you can see it on some plays. Like the one that I remember is the Bears game when Calvin Ridley and him weren't on the same page at the end of the game. Ridley kept running, and Levis tried to throw the back shoulder to him right before the pick. You could see Levis just yelling, and like it just felt like everything was so tight, and he was just trying so hard to make up for the mistake he just made. It feels like it's only compounding itself. It's getting worse. The more mistakes he makes, he feels like he has to make up for it. And that can't happen because it's only going to get worse.
And that's why, as I was saying, the play action calls, you got to call those. Give him those big, huge windows to throw the ball to get him in a rhythm, to get that confidence going, to relax him and get him to understand, hey, I could throw the ball 3 yards to Tajay Spears and he'll get me another 30.
Yeah.
I could throw, you know what I mean? Those are the things that he has to get adapted to and fix. And it's going to come with time, hopefully for their sake. But I mean, the jury's still out.
And a good point from Kenston. Hopefully, maybe this bye week, he can take a step back, relax, get healthy, and maybe that will reset him for week 6 against the Colts. David is also on our phone lines, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, wanting to talk about the team's demeanor under Mason Rudolph. David, what you got for us?
Yeah. I've lived here for about 18 years, but I'm from Chicago, so I've seen my share of bad quarterbacks.
Oh, yeah.
And with Tennessee, right? I've seen the Cutlers, I've seen the Grossmans, I've seen the Trubiskys. You
saw Jim Miller.
And I've seen Mariota, and I've seen Locker, right? And to me, he's kind of in that vein. I don't think he keeps being compared to these good quarterbacks, right? That started out slow. I think he's more like those, and it's just hard to see that year after year after year, right? From Chicago to Tennessee. But anyway, I noticed that when Mason Rudolph went in, when he went out and Mason Rudolph went in, it just seemed like the whole demeanor of the team became more confident, calm. It's like, I don't know if he's a spaz, but I shouldn't say that probably. But they're just like you guys were talking about how tightly wound he is. I don't know if that was what it was, but it just seemed like the team changed, and it just seemed like they were playing better as a team. Is that what you saw, or what do you think of that? Does that seem accurate?
I thought things were better in rhythm, and it was very clear that Mason Rudolph, and Nicole did a great job of picking up on that. It's clear, like, Rudolph knows where he's going to go with the football, and he just gets it there. I think the best example was that 3rd and 4 that we talked about, but also you look like they took over, I think it was at their 44-yard line or so, and he ripped that throw, man. He ripped it. He saw that safety go with Hopkins on the go route, and he said, okay, you know what? That little area is going to be open. Boom, and he went there, and it was a 26-yarder. Tyler Boyd, great job going up and snapping it. Great job by the team getting on the ball and spiking it giving the old man a chance to kick the field goal. So I think he's on to something, and that's why actually last week, if you remember, I was asking about tempo. Anybody associated with offense, I was asking, because that's a way you create that sense of urgency. You get that, that spark. And it's not something that they did. Obviously, Levis only played 10 snaps, but it's something I think they're going to go to kind of get that urgency, and it's necessary, in my opinion.
Going to need to get him in rhythm. And play action has done that. We've seen him make those plays out of play action last year. Hopefully that's something that is featured predominantly against the Colts next week. You mentioned Nick Folk. Quickly want to mention that that Braden Narvison, Nick Folk battle in camp.
I don't know who was talking that.
The Titans clearly made the right decision.
Narvison
missed, I believe, a 37-yard field goal this week for the Packers. Vikings got him again. Vikings 4-0, one of 2 undefeated teams across the NFL. A couple more questions here on the text line as we wrap up our Ask TD segment. Tehran, if the Titans had begun the year with Joe Burrow as quarterback, what would their record be right now?
3-1 at a minimum. Listen, you're asking the wrong guy about Joe Burrow. Like, I'm in the fan club. You know what I'm saying? So I at a minimum 3-1. They messed around before. No.
Yeah, that you definitely win the Bears game.
Joe Burrow's that dude.
You obviously win the Dolphins game. I think you
beat the Jets.
You beat the Jets, and you probably beat the Packers too. Honestly, like, yes, the Packers play better than those other teams did, but I think you can hang in there with a Malik Willis offense if you have Joe Burrow running the show on the other side.
Absolutely.
So, could be undefeated. That's a good question. Anwin Columbia has a question for TD. Why don't the Titans use Jaquan Jackson's speed on 3rd and 4th down plays, jet sweeps in short yardage?
It's a good question. A very good question. I would try to get that playmaking ability onto the field. I don't know why they're not. I mean, you have Treylon Burks, playing a lot of snaps. Westbrook Ikini playing a lot of snaps. So it's just he's lower in the pecking order. So, I mean, there has to be a reason. I just don't know what it is.
And I know NWI has gone down the depth chart, but how many times has he been targeted this year? Like, that's a guy who's reliable. Like, I can't even off the top of my head remember him getting the ball thrown his way.
Yeah, it hasn't been much.
Which,
say that.
I mean, with Treylon Burks getting as many snaps as he's gotten, and he had a nice catch from Rudolph on Monday night, but man, I'd love to see NWI out there a little more, get the ball looking his way.
Hasn't been targeted at all.
At all.
Oof.
I was going to say, nothing came to mind of seeing Nick Westbrook-Ikina get the ball thrown his way. That is crazy to have a guy he's been about as consistent as it comes as a, number 3, number 4 wide receiver. I get that you have better options than him now, but
what T.O. say? You got me out here running routes for nothing.
Running cardio out there. Man, I don't know. I think maybe that's something we should see. I'm not saying completely take Treylon Burks out of the game plan, but I think maybe split those snaps between NWI and Treylon.
The tough thing is Burks gives them, and I could see some of Burks reps going to Jaquan in that they want to stretch the field, and Burks is the guy that usually do that. I think Jaquan Jackson, maybe every once in a while, get that man a couple opportunities and see what happens.
Yeah, that is true. NWI isn't going to be a guy who's going to stretch the field for you. I guess he would be more of like a DeAndre Hopkins, like possession, like at the sticks on third down. But still, crazy that he hasn't even gotten the ball thrown his way yet this year. Maybe that's somebody that they try and rotate in as we come out of the bye week. Thanks to everybody who chimed in here on Ask TD. That was fun. We got 45 minutes out of that. Lots of good calls, lots of good texts. Appreciate you guys chiming in. We will wrap up the show when we come back. Big sports night tonight. We got Falcons and Bucks on Thursday Night Football. And of course, we're going to talk some Mets and Brewers as I know TD is getting ready with first pitch about 25 minutes away. We'll wrap up the show coming up next here on Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Wrapping up the show here on this Thursday, Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Jake Lyman been filling in for Jared today. Been fun. We had Dr. Crane, Nick Frazier in the first hour. Max Hers talk Preds from 3 to 4. And we've had TD here for the final half of the show. Teron Davenport. We did ask TD there. We got some good questions in there from some Titans fans during the bye week. So thanks to everybody who chimed in. TD, I know you're probably starting to get nervous. We got game 3 coming up in about 15 minutes between the Mets and the Brewers. Winner moves on, faces the Phillies in the NLDS. How you feeling? Confident for tonight that the Mets are going to be able to pull it out?
Yeah, I'm feeling good. And, Edwin Diaz, he hasn't gotten an opportunity to pitch. I'm hoping to see him. Frankie Lindor, but I just want the polar bear to, I don't know, Keith Hernandez, somebody go talk to him, man.
Him falling down on the bat the other day. And I get that it was it happens, but you're a professional baseball player. You got to throw the bat aside. That cost them a run.
Yeah. I just want him to get going. But, and also my young buck, and Willie will tell you, I've been on him my young boy, Mark Vientos, man. Even when he was in the farm system, everybody was talking Brett Beatty. I'm like, yeah, I like Brett Beatty, but man, watch out for Vientos. Don't forget about him. And I need him to, so I see he's moved up to second. He was batting fourth. So yeah, Mendoza shifted the lineup around. Let's see what happens. Frankie, man, go ahead and lead off with a home run. Get your Ricky Henderson on.
I mean, he's had his big moments in his career. Yeah. He had that home run with Cleveland in the World Series a few years ago, and then obviously the big swing on Monday in that doubleheader against the Braves. I was telling you during one of the breaks, I cannot believe that Jose Iglesias is hitting 5th for a playoff team in the year 2024. That dude, he was the Tigers starting shortstop in the year they went to the World Series in 2012. But he could not hit to save his life. He was out there solely to be an elite defensive shortstop. And he's hitting in the middle of the order for the Mets 12 years later in a playoff series. I think that's funny.
That's crazy.
I'll knock on wood as I say this, but this is the 12th time there's been a 3-game wild card series. And every single one beforehand, so each of the last 2 years, all 4, and the 3 so far this year, the team who won game 1 has moved on. So the Mets' history is on their side for tonight's game against the Brewers.
Don't jinx it. Man.
I know.
You're like the caller. You're like the guy calling the game and say, for the year, he is 37 for 37 in field goals.
Oh, and he shanks it. I'm knocking. I prefaced I was knocking on wood. History is on the Mets side. Let's hope they can pull it out. Again, we've talked about, we've got our 2 Mets fans here. Ian's got his Mets stuff on today. TD, a big Mets fan. Willie Donick, a big Mets fan. We're hoping they can get it done for the station. But again, this Brewers team, they've got plenty of guys who called Nashville home too. So good connections on either side. Should be a fun one tonight. And again, you can listen in right here on the game right after we get off the air here at 6. Before we get out of here, got football tonight too. Falcons and Bucks, NFC South battle. Heading into the season, probably the 2 favorites in that division. Should be a fun one tonight between Kirk Cousins and Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, and a couple members of TD's hit squad, my fantasy team. I got Bijan Robinson on one side. I wish I had Mike Evans, but I got Chris Godwin on the other side.
I've got the exact same 2 guys tonight. Really? Those are the only 2 guys I have in fantasy tonight.
I got Rashad White.
Okay. Rashad White is good. I think, you look at this game, the Falcons have done a lot defensively. It's just a matter of time until that continues to come together. But, it's one that I admittedly am not going to watch.
You're going to be watching baseball.
I'm watching the Mets, man.
I watched all of the Titans game on Monday night, but I admitted to, I texted my dad. I was like, man, that is the least excited I think I've ever been for a September Titans game. And part of it was because the Titans have struggled, but part of it was the Tigers were heading into the playoffs the next day. And it's like, I'm excited for playoff baseball, and I just couldn't get my head around the Titans playing. Playoff baseball is just fun. It is. Yeah. And I hope that we can we can keep the grimace lot going here for the Mets.
I like when they got the mic on the bases and stuff too. Like it's cool. Like you hear him slide into it, it's like that. Like I love that, man.
And I love in the playoffs, they crank the mics. So everything off the bat sounds like it's going 500 feet.
Yeah.
Like and they do it because when it does go 500 feet,
like,
it makes it sound awesome.
Yep.
Which it annoyed me yesterday. Obviously, Ian, you probably weren't. Neither of you probably watched the Tigers-Astros game. But
I was on during the day, right? It was on during
it
the
was
show.
at like
So
a 1:30
I had it
start.
on here. I wasn't paying super close attention.
Well, if you couldn't hear it, you wouldn't know.
Yeah,
but about
okay.
the 6th inning, it sounded like you were listening to a broadcast from the 1950s. It sounded like they were calling it through a phone booth.
Really?
And the timing was off too, so you'd hear the ball hit the glove before the ball even came out of the pitcher's hand. I was not happy.
Get it together.
They got it fixed before like all of the drama in the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning. But man, for an inning or two there, I was pretty annoyed because that's part of what makes playoff baseball great. It's hearing the sounds, hearing the crowd get up right after you hear the crack of the bat. Like it's that's a great part of it too. So
no doubt.
Hopefully tonight we get a good one. Jose Quintana for the Mets, Tobias Myers for the Brewers, who was he was down here with the Sounds to start the year.
We don't care. We don't.
We'll see who can move on. Again, winner gets the Phillies, and maybe TD will get to make a trip back home and get to see a game out there.
I need to go see my parents. Especially my mom. So yeah, I've been a bad son. And I actually need to take my girl to go meet my parents too. Because so
hopefully
pack up.
We need the Mets to come through for you.
Yeah,
we need them to come through for you. Well, if you missed the first hour of TD being on the show, make sure you tune in tomorrow. Jake and TD 6 to 7.
Right.
We will be re-airing that. We've said what we need to say about the Titans. So Jake and TD, presented by Soul Nashville. You can listen in from 6 to 7 every Friday. And again, if you missed the first hour today, make sure you tune in for that as well. For Teron Davenport, Max Hers, and Nick Frazier, my great co-host today, I'm Jake Lyman, signing off here on this Thursday. Jared back tomorrow here on Stillman & Company. Baseball up next here on 102.5 and 106.3 The Game.